Hello everyone and welcome to the Shannon RFC no-show game, a slightly different approach to raising much needed funds for some charities doing extremely important work in Limerick and beyond. The main pitch in Thomond Park is booked, the teams have been selected. If you can see the stadium from your house, you'll see that the lights are on, but nobody has showed up. Instead, we'll be spending the next while talking to lots of familiar faces from around the country about how COVID-19 has affected their lives, rugby past and present, and their thoughts on the various matchups that would have taken place if the game went ahead tonight. Charities are expecting a 40% reduction in income from fundraising this year, but unfortunately, more people than ever need their help. So if you can, please donate at the link in the description below. We hope you enjoy what we've put together, and without further delay, let's get into it. Marcus Oren and Mick Galwey, thanks very much for joining us. How are you getting on, lads?
Good now.
All good, yeah. Good to see you, boys.
Mick, how's the lockdown been treating you?
Yeah, it's different. It's certainly different, but it's it is what it is, I suppose. Thank God we have the good weather. But you kind of get sick of replays and sick of you don't know what day of the week you have. But sure, that's where we're at. Is there's a long weekend coming up and no different than the other weekends,
Yeah. They're all melding into one at this stage.
Yeah.
Oh, it is bizarre though. Like there have been a few times I've had to check what day of the week it is, which is funny the first couple of times, and it's kind of not a great sign either. Marcus, how about you?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's trying to work from home, and we've young kids trying to homeschooling as well. So yeah, you talk about bank holidays. I've never counted so many bank holidays. You know when they're coming, and then you realise you can do nothing about it. So it is bizarre. But look, we're getting through it. We're nearly there.
Are you homeschooling the kids, Marcus?
God help them.
I'm standing over them threateningly to make them finish the homework. That's my homeschooling.
God help. You're right, Gallup.
My mother was a teacher, so I've a good teacher in my mother. So she was tough on me, so I've followed on suit.
Well, they're very good at sport anyway, so they'll probably be okay long term.
Tell me, Marcus, just from your own point of view, you're obviously a player development manager with Rugby Players Ireland, looking after the Munster boys. It's a very uncertain time for a lot of guys who might have been coming off contract and who ordinarily would have found something somewhere else, but now just because none of the clubs know where they are financially and none of the leagues know where they're at with regard to the calendar, a lot of guys are kind of in limbo at the moment. How difficult is it for those guys who were coming off contract?
Yeah, look, it's very difficult. I suppose you could categorise a few guys in different groups. There's a few guys that have said, look, they're retiring and they're moving on completely. So even finding work in the current economic climate is going to be tough. But then for those rugby guys who are looking to continue playing rugby somewhere else, as you're all aware, the clubs in England, especially the first division over there, are not hiring. And France is probably the same at the moment, complete lockdown. They're trying to keep what they have. And then you've got guys who just want to try and get something somewhere, and then with the view to coming back. And while Japan and the USA are probably hiring, a lot of our guys don't feel like it's a pathway back to top professional rugby in Europe. So you have to cut your cloth in what you want to do, and they're big decisions, especially for some of our young guys who maybe might be leaving the academy or development squads. That they've got to make that decision. If they go further afield, the chances of coming back this direction it lessens their chances.
Marcus, in terms of the player welfare side of it, how have you found that the players are dealing with? Because obviously it's a stressful time for everyone. But with rugby being stopped, and I suppose we're starting to see a bit of a roadmap back. But in the height of it, when there was so much uncertainty, did you find a lot of players reaching out and struggling?
Yeah, look, there would be. You know yourself, lad. We were all creatures of habit. When you take people's routine away, and you've kind of restructure your day, it's very difficult for the lads. So yeah, absolutely. And look, one of the pluses for me is I've had fellas engaging with us who normally wouldn't. And look, you might say it took a crisis for fellas to do that, but like our thing is we're always there. And if a guy feels that he's stressed out by what's happening, and he reaches out for support, that's what we're trying to encourage. But we cover that across so many areas. So for example, like obviously the mental health side of things is really, really important. dealing with anxiety, dealing with uncertainty. So we've done a lot around that space, and we'll be doing a lot more about the uncertainty of maybe moving back into rugby again. So because that's another transition for the lads. But there's other things around finance. The lads were on a pay deferral, so talking and connecting them to financial advisors on dealing with mortgage payments and stuff like that. From education, we have a few lads that were finishing their courses with UL and in UCC, and it all went online, so supporting them. So a lot of them are just finished up now. And then we have a few guys who are actually looking to take on something now in this space. So look, there's a silver lining with everything. If these guys start preparing for the inevitability of retirement, please God, a lot of them won't have to pull the trigger on that for another few years, but at least they'll be prepared. At least they'll have the groundwork done. So that's the one benefit that's coming out of it from our point of view.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's a silver lining to it, and I suppose the tricky thing, I know you've told me in the past, is when you go into a group of players are only concerned with what's happening that week and possibly the next week. So when you're trying to talk to them about preparing for something that's going to happen in 5-6 years, that it just goes over their heads. But this has made everyone sort of sit down and reflect. So hopefully that'll be a positive coming out of that side. On the other side, Marcus, I see you're benched again.
Yeah, I am. And the irony of this is, lads, as I said to you before, it was actually meant to be Peter Classie on with Galwey tonight, but he couldn't make it either, so I've been drafted in again. So I thought it was over all that shit, to be honest with you. Last minute call-ups, whether your man burnt the hand off himself lighting a bonfire or just not feeling up to it today. I get drafted in.
Great back to captain's runs, Marcus. He always
yeah. That was the thing. I'd do a captain's run, and then I'd ring home to the mother and say, look, I think I could be starting on Saturday because Claude didn't turn up for training. And lo and behold, your man Lazarus would arrive on then fully loaded for the game on Saturday. And Muppet here would get about 5 minutes at the end of the game. So look, history repeating itself, lads. Thanks very much. Confidence is through the roof, really.
There was, I think it was Liam Toland earlier, Galwey. He actually made a good observation saying that because you were picked on the Limerick 15, that you would deliberately have picked a weakened Ireland 15 to make it more likely that you'd come out on top. Do you have anything to say about that?
No, I picked a team. I picked a team that would be capable of coming to Thomond Park and and playing there and being used to it. You know what I mean? There's obviously any team you'll ever pick. There's going to be. Let's put it this way, Liam Toland was never going to be on it in case he was disappointed. That's out there first, you know what I mean? He'd probably be good for the crack after, all right. I definitely have him there for that. Water by maybe. But no, he wasn't going to be on the team. I picked a kind of a team, and again, I put a bit of a local interest into it as well. You know what I mean? But it's I'm happy with my team, I'm marking Tom Hale, so, the fact that I picked Tom, I think he'll do me a favour there, so that should be all right.
Can you talk to us a bit about your Earls, Mick? Because it's something that's come up quite a lot.
It has come up, yeah. It has come up an awful lot, and I suppose what a lot of people mightn't understand or remember, I have known your Earls since we played Munster under 18 second row together, so we go back that far. You know what I mean? And that's not today or yesterday. But Jorrells was around at a time that he got a certain amount of caps from Munster. I remember one time he did come to an Irish squad session and he was probably very unlucky. And not alone was he unlucky, I suppose he was unlucky with Munster as well, because, you had all these players coming through, the likes of the Liam Tolands, the Corkeries, the Eddie Halveys, and, the Axels and all these. So he was around at a time when there was a lot of good players, but certainly he was a very consistent player. And yeah, I know there was something said there recently that he was probably one of the unluckiest players not to have got a cap for Ireland because, he's like, for those of us who would have played with him and against him, he was certainly a player that you'd love to have on your team. He was certainly a player that's, that did many exciting things, you know what I mean? And I remember having many battles, particularly with young Munsters down through the years, and just to watch the battle that he maybe be having with Eddie Halvey or somebody like that was amazing just to watch it. And I suppose he had a couple of standout moments, Jorrells, but for me, I remember he came into a Munster team late when we played Australia in '92. Pat O'Hara was injured, and he came in late into that, and he certainly wasn't out of his depth that day, you know what I mean? And he was phenomenal. And again, of course, that was 92. And I think the following year then in 93, I think, was it, 92. Was it 93 that Munsters won, won their first AIL, and he was very, the try he got in that game, the intercept from Nicky Barry was amazing. So that's the kind of player he was. I know that he'll always be in the shadow of Keith, but certainly Jorrells was to me was a phenomenal player. But should definitely have got more than he got. There's no doubt about that.
You're saying he'd be in the shadow of Keith, but if this game really went ahead and he came off the bench, I'd say he'd take the head off him.
I'd say he would. You know what I mean? Like it'd be his one opportunity to play in an Irish jersey, and that's why I looked at it as a player like Jorrells deserved to be on that. And yes, even if it was Keith coming down, he would put his body on the line, and it's that kind of stuff that you'd love to see in a game like this,
I remember the lads saying that they they'd be driving past. I can't remember which park it was. I think it might have been Shelburne Park or something like that when they were young, and they used to see Keith when he was about 12 or 13 doing the 2x2 tackling drill with his father, and very much hitting him as hard as he could and creasing him. So there's no denying where the ability in that respect came from. Just got to, like, it's obviously, look, we're all Munster men, and we all like to kind of give out about historical bias towards Leinster players and the fact that certain guys were overlooked, and we would still like to do it today to some extent as well. But I mean, was it genuinely a thing in the 80s and 90s? Like, was it a lot harder to get recognition at national level if you were from kind of outside of that Dublin and what was perceived as the IRFU bubble? Yeah,
I certainly think it was. You know what I mean? Like there was, I remember even when Shannon started going well. You know what I mean? And a player, yourself, and this is obviously many years later. But I remember, I can honestly say, from a personal point of view, and I've got the record being dropped more than anybody else. But when Shannon was going well in the 90s, we were winning IELTS for fun. I would personally say I was probably playing the best rugby in my career, and yet I never got a start with Ireland. You know what I mean? And when I was nearly gone over the top, I got another 22 or 3 caps. You know what I mean? So, leaking out all that, and the start of professionalism was very tough. But there's no doubt about it. There was certainly a lot of players never got their fair crack. You know what I mean? And players come to mind, the likes of Jorrells and the likes of Pat Murray. And, these players were phenomenal players. And they should have got their running green. There's no doubt about that. Because, but sometimes that worked for us as well. It worked for us when we were playing with Shannon, particularly, and certainly when we were playing with Munster. You know what I mean? Like, we would have looked at the player opposite us and say, look, today I'm going to have to prove myself again, and you do it again and again and again just to prove that you were better than your opposite number. And obviously, in doing that, you were contributing to the team you were playing with. So it was something that drove us on, and certainly something that made us stronger. There's no doubt about that. But there was certainly a bias back in the day, and it's just something that we had to live with.
Olive, before we came on at the start, and we were looking through the teams, myself and Duncan were chatting, and Duncan would have picked up on a couple of lads. He said, listen, he says, I don't know a huge amount about Eddie Halvey. He said, can you, and like when we spoke to Liam Toland actually picked Eddie out and said, like, there was, you spoke about the competition that was there for Jorrells, and that was like probably the pathway was pretty congested getting into that Munster back row. But for the two of you, for Marcus and for you, Mick, you played with him at Munster and with Ireland and with Shannon. Like, can you just tell us a little bit about him? Because I just remember going to the games and seeing this phenomenal talent.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. Like, but he was the kind of player that you could build your game around. You know what I mean? Like, I remember even with Munster, we started first with Shannon, like, where we were launching up at the front of the line-out. I wasn't the most agile in the front of the line-out. When I wasn't this, they'd get up all right, but it maybe took it, but particularly in the opposition ball. I remember, like, when we used to lift the Halvey, like, you'd throw him up for fun, and it really would. And you can imagine now, and both of you would imagine, trying to get the ball over, someone that's really tall at the front of the line-out, it's going to put you off. And it's something that we certainly used Halvey with. But it was just his ball skills. It was everything he had. Like, he could kick a ball, he could pass the ball off either side. He was the kind of player you could play in any position, and he was ahead of his time from that point of view. And I suppose what a lot of people won't know, I suppose, is that Eddie Halvey was the first professional player to be I suppose, taken out of Ireland, even before Keith Wood and even before all these great players. Like Eddie Halvey replaced Francois Pienaar in Saracens that a lot of people wouldn't realise, you know what I mean? And I remember that one of the first, probably the first Heineken Cup match in Thomond Park, and all the scouts came over. In fairness, at the time, everybody thought they were looking at Axel, but it was Eddie that picked out, and we lost Eddie earlier on, but I know he came back to us. But you know, Saracens, when you think of it, like, and when you weigh it up, Saracens, Francois Pienaar retired, and they replaced him with Eddie Halvey. I think that speaks an amount about it. You know what I mean?
Marcus, moving on to the teams themselves. The front rows, it's kind of an old school versus more new age. And as it was mentioned, you're subbing for the old school. So, what are your thoughts with regard to how the front row has changed over the years with regard to scrummaging? Like before we started recording, we were talking about how like scrums were literally a free for all before, and that's not an exaggeration. But I think people don't realise it was like that until more or less, like, you know, 9-10 years ago. It was pretty lawless. So how do you see the role of the front row having changed kind of in that period?
Yeah, it's changed a huge amount, to be fair. And I think it's changed in the sense that when you talk about the unit, it's the 6 players now rather than the 3. And it's how you, and Fla would probably testify more to this as a forwards coach, is that, you know, when you spring those guys from the bench, they're probably really, really important. So tactically, that has changed. Like I came from a time where there was one prop at the bench. And, you know, so more often than not, he was either a tight head or a loose head. And if he was a tight head, as a loose head, you were playing the 80 minutes, you know, unless you got an injury. So for myself and Hazy, I remember with Shannon and with Munster and even with Ireland, it was a case of you played most of the game. And even just looking at the scrums themselves then as well, you know, when I started out, you were literally taking a run at it. You know, I think everyone's watching the Rugby Gold over the last couple of weeks, and you see the scrums, like, you know, I described one there recently where I remember myself running to the scrum where the mark was made and didn't even stop or plant my feet, just found with Frankie Sheehan and ran into the scrum. So, you know, you're going out to where it's completely controlled. So it's I'm glad of it. I'm only sorry it didn't come in earlier, because you know, when you're going up against an As Durant or someone that size, it's not easy. One of my big memories of coming into Shannon team eventually is having that man Mick behind me, and I remember we played Young Munsters, and we would have been up against Paca or something like that, and you could probably smell the drink from fellas from the night before, like. But all I heard in the first scrum was, "Oh Jesus, Marcus, go handy on me, you know, today." And all I heard from Galway behind me, "Don't mind that, so and so. There's nothing wrong with him," and he drove me through on top of him. So you'd be wary of guys like that who were trying to pull a fast one, and you know, when you had a pack around you like the Shannon pack, I learned those tricks fairly quick.
Just in terms of wrapping up, lads, and looking at the matchups themselves, Marcus, which team would you give the nod to and why?
I think there's a lot of quality in that Ireland team, but if you put Limerick as the name of the team, in some ways it doesn't really matter who's talking out. I think there's bitterness, there's anger, there's passion, there's probably hatred. That's it. I think that's enough. There's enough old school there that it's got to be Limerick all the way, you know. So yeah, it's an obvious one for me.
And Gallup, for you, you're a bit conflicted here as a player coach.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's who you're playing with that's a lot more important than who you're coaching. So yeah, from my point of view, I'm very happy with the Limerick team, and Mark, I think Mark has made a good point there. You know, if I remember even a few times that Munster would have played against the rest of Ireland in matches, you know what I mean? And it was huge, like, and it was a huge drama. Particularly, you remember the 1999 World Cup, Marcus? You know what I mean? When the Irish team came down, I know it was in Cork, but like
you had a tear in your eye before.
I had a tear in my eye most matches, but that's the point.
Jesus, I was never so riled up for the game.
Yeah. So I can imagine if if reality was reality, and this was a Limerick team taking on Ireland, I can imagine that, I suppose, what we wouldn't be calling them, and and how we'd build it up, and it would be certainly we'd be going back to a bit of old school, I think, and passion. But at the same time, I was very much aware of that when I was picking the team. So there's a lot of players that maybe that feel, or people might feel that other players might have been picked. But for example, I put Peter Manny on the wing. You know what I mean? And people will say, how the hell did he end up in the wing? Well, he played on the wing for Cork, if fellas remember, in the AIL final. And he'd be marking Richie Wallace, and he'd frighten the shite out of Richie. So, that's the simple reason that I put him there. And he'd be like an extra man around the pitch. But then again, as we said, I had someone like Trevor Brennan and Gerald's on the bench. You know what I mean? So, when it got fairly tough, you'd be bringing on those lads. But it was amazing when I was looking at the team, and I'm not just saying because Mark, but really, when I was picking the Irish team, I couldn't get over the amount of good lads that were on the Limerick bench. You know what I mean? Like, when you looked at the Limerick bench, God almighty, I could have picked the whole Limerick bench and then started my Irish team with them, which that's the way it was. But certainly, and maybe it's something to look forward to in the future, and I know you don't want to be particularly, I suppose, in the professional game, but I would love to see a Limerick team take on somebody. Like years ago, we used to have these matches, you know what I mean? North Munster versus South Munster, trial games and God knows what, and I'd love to see that happen again. Even going forward for a charity, a Limerick team in a charity match going forward, I think. I know it would be fantastic because I think you certainly you'd fill Thomond Park. There's no doubt about that. But looking back, looking at both teams, there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of great players. They're not only they're not known in Munster and Ireland, but they're known all over the world. You know what I mean? And I think we're blessed to be able to pick players like that.
Just one last thing for me, lads. If we were going to do that kind of tactic where it was Leinster or Limerick, boot and bollock, I think we need a good referee that would allow it. So either a Wiry Sexton or a Jimmy Clancy, if you can arrange it, and we'll be sorted.
Absolutely.
Turning out blind eye, if you know what I mean.
Look, thanks very much for joining us. We'll just remind everyone that this has all been done to raise funds for some excellent causes in the Limerick region. So the link to donate is in the box. So please donate if you can. Marcus and Galv, thank you very much, and the very best of luck in this while. Hope you
cheers, boys.
We'll talk to you soon. We're joined now by a very familiar face and probably more so voice to rugby fans all over the country, Liam Toland. Liam, thanks very much for joining us. How are you?
I'm as good as gold, Duncan. Thanks for having me.
Tori, I have a couple of questions. Thanks for coming on, first of all, and supporting this great initiative. But everyone that we're getting on here, we're chatting to them, and this is a crazy time with COVID. And I'm not sure I'm sure most people know that you're one of the vainest men on the country. So how have you been managing getting through quarantine now? Your hair is still looking pretty good there. You don't seem to have put on any noticeable weight that I can see from the breast level up. So,
for a start, could you come around? I need a neck shave. I remember when I was a cadet back in the day, every morning we used to have to shave our necks. I've got this fuzzy amount of hair coming off the back of my neck. I can cover everything else, but that's what's catching me out. So it's been a weird time. And I tell you one thing, the increase of the 5 kilometers will be very helpful because I'm going cycling, which is an ideal sport for us retired guys because knees and hips and shoulders. So it's been beautiful. The weather has been very helpful. But I think from my point of view, I've disciplined myself to get out and cycle a bike because otherwise the cocooning thing, we're working away all the time and it would just, I'd find it too hard. So the weather's been brilliant and cycling has been absolutely brilliant as well.
Totally. You haven't been selected on either of the teams here, and you're not a coach either. But Katie McCluskey, who's organised this with us, has said that you want to get on and talk about some of the charity work that you're doing yourself on behalf of the Midwest Simon community. So while you talk yourself up there and tell us a little bit about the Simon community and the good work that you're doing with them there.
Yeah, well, just in the interest of accuracy, I'm a...
Don't worry about the accuracy. Don't worry about the accuracy.
Okay, this isn't being recorded or anything, no. Okay, fine. Thankfully that. But I'm just a member of the board. So it's Jackie and her team that, I suppose, never waste a crisis is a good starting point. And it's been wonderful to watch Jackie and her team in the middle of this crisis, because their can-do attitude was always there, but it's very much come to the fore now, and it's very impressive. And when you link that with their non-judgmental approach to what Midwest Simon are doing within the community, it's very impressive. And most charities are struggling for obvious reasons. Funding is down, and this month we will be having our annual ball. Now, I think it's a celebration, but when you link a charity with a ball and a celebration, you kind of say, hang on a second, what are you celebrating? Homelessness. Well, I think celebrating the great work that's been done by the team and the amazing impact it's making within the community. But the obvious negative to not having the ball is the fundraising is down. The awareness of what Jackie and her team is down is that the shop has been closed, the donations around the bucket collecting has been closed. But the most recent, and this what makes it so local, Jerry, the most recent event I was involved in was the sleep out in Thomond Park, which was an amazing experience. A lot of Shannon guys, a lot of Munster guys involved, and just random people from the community who want to be part. But one of my roles that night was to interview a number of the end users. And I sat down not knowing what the tone should be, because here I am, a silver spoon to my mouth, very, very fortunate life, all the, great family, primarily great parents, great family, great home life, and the rest was up to me, but that foundation was phenomenally advantageous to me. But I met with a number, I tried to figure out the tone, but I was talking to one guy who's now similar age to me, a little younger, and he'd been through an extraordinary journey that would just blow the socks off you. So I tried to bring it back local. I said, look, where were you in school? So his dad was in the army, so based in Sarsfield Barracks. So as a result of that, he was in the model school, okay? And I said, okay, wow, right, and what's that like? And he started talking about life in the model. And I said, all right, that's very interesting, really interested in sport. And he says, I was sitting beside Jerry Flannery.
Huh?
So this guy, who, like, you've got Grand Slams, Heineken Cups, all the bells and whistles of your journey, but at one point in time, you actually sat beside this guy, right? I won't tell you his name, but I was blown away by that. I was like, what? And then he started telling his story. And if you kind of paralleled your journey to his, and how it started to diverge very quickly. So his parents fell into hard times. He moved school. He went up a different school. A lot of his dreams and ambitions were taken from him. So he just told his story, and he ended up on the street. And during that journey, all the horror, and he started filling us in, and I was just blown away by this guy. And I couldn't get you out of my mind in this, right? So he went and we spoke for maybe a half an hour. But what it did, it told me, so confirmed something, how lucky I am, obviously. And I'm not saying that from oh, look at me. I'm just saying the simple things that I took for granted, stuff like great parents, great family, great home, good schooling, sporting connections around, gave me such an advantage. And when they start to erode away from you, how you become vulnerable, and this guy did. The second thing I noticed about this guy was how easy it is to help him, because he's grateful for the new fresh start. And this guy's had 100 fresh starts, but he was there with his girlfriend, who also went through a similar journey. They have an apartment just off Catherine Street, which has been supplied by Jackie and her team and the community, essentially. And this guy, I've met him on the street several times, and he's just a wonderful, decent guy, really decent fella. And he fell into hard times. And you sat beside him, whatever, 30 years ago. And it's just an extraordinary example of the work that Midwest Simon are doing within the community to people who've come from the community. And we could be sitting beside the guy who you meet on the street. And that's as simple as it is. So from what I do, I'm just on the board. But Jackie and her team, it's especially challenging at the moment, lack of funds. And the food bank as an example, right? So the food bank was this FEED, it's an acronym, FEAD, it's Fund for European Aid to Most Deprived. So there's pallets of food, ordinary food comes in every couple of weeks and is distributed in Nina, Ennis and Limerick. Really difficult because of all the logistics of distributing it. But the numbers have gone from about 7,000 to 8,000. So there's 1,000 new sets of people because of COVID that need to queue up in a line to get food. And that's all from within the community. So that's kind of why I'm involved in it. It's a community-based concept, very simple, great can-do attitude, and it's really giving back. And it's a pleasure to be part of it, to be honest, especially because of the can-do attitude. And
Liam, what can they do now with COVID coming in? How can they raise funds, or how can people contribute to this charity now?
Yeah, Well, there's a funds issue and then there's an awareness issue. And I thank a lot of the Munster guys on the Foot in the Door campaign, which is literally going up to your front door, open and going inside, and the concept of imagine if you didn't have a front door. So the awareness aspect is important, and connecting that to the local journey that the community are going through. There is a telephone number, 061 608 980, which is the Speaker's Corner for those from Limerick. Speaker's Corner is a famous place. There's a beautiful spot, and there's where you got a lot of drop-in people coming in. But it's a good place to start. If you are someone who is vulnerable, it's a great number to call. If you're somebody who wants to give back, it's a great place to start the journey too. And would you believe in the age of social media, an awful lot of the vulnerable people themselves are contacting through Facebook. So Facebook is a good place if you're vulnerable too to get involved, or just get online as well. But that telephone number is a good place to start the journey, and it's very local. It's a community-based, and like another thing that's happening in cocooning is that vulnerable over 70s who find themselves homeless, Midwest are supporting them in a cocooned way as well. So like life goes on, life gets in the way of our plans, isn't it? And so it would be really helpful if people became aware of the stories and became aware of what they could do and just simply support as best they can. That would be brilliant.
And Dunk, if I'm correct, you acted as an ambassador for the Simon community there for a good few years until you actually had to go moved away with rugby to France, correct?
That's right, yeah. So I know firsthand the wonderful work that Liam is talking about, that Jackie and her team doing there. And I think it's really poignant to hear him tell that story, because ultimately, I think, as Liam says, people don't realise just how kind of close to our own situations a lot of people started out in life, and then just through bad luck and bad circumstances, they end up going on very different paths. And like I think that's really powerful. The fact that this gentleman in question was actually sitting next to you in the model school, and you know, for all intents and purposes, anyone looking in at that classroom would have just seen two regular young fellas sitting next to one another. But unfortunately, as Liam says, like life just throws things at you that aren't the fault of any individual that has to suffer the consequences of it. Particularly a child like that who, you know, has to move school, parents fall on hard times, that kind of stuff. It's all out of their control, but it has a hugely adverse effect on their opportunities to go and fulfill their potential in life. And that's why organizations like Midwest Simon are so crucial, because they provide such an important service at the coalface, really. So I'm delighted to hear that Liam has been involved with them and is doing really important work to help them spread the message and to raise funds. I was reading something the other day that said I think charities are expecting a 60% drop in funding for the calendar year of 2020. So you can imagine an organization that's almost entirely reliant on donations, like a lot of the homelessness charities are. It's going to be very difficult for them to continue to provide the services that are needed to an ever increasing number of vulnerable people. So that's why it's very important that if people can, that they contribute, and even if it's just something like raising awareness so that the message is being spread, that will make all the difference. So well done, Liam, and obviously, as always, well done to everyone involved with Midwest Simon. Just moving on to rugby, Liam, because obviously, as we mentioned before, you're a well-known face and voice when it comes to analysing teams. So what are your own thoughts? We'll talk about the back row maybe initially, that matchup that we spoke about prior to you, or prior to us starting to record there. What are your thoughts there?
It's an amazing two back rows. I have it here in front of me on the screen. I suppose the most successful of all of the open sides would be David Wallace, for all the obvious reasons. But for me, Eddie Halvey, I had the pleasure or displeasure of playing with and against Eddie, David, and Ger Earls. And Ger Earls at his pomp. And like I was competing for a place in that competition. Of course, I was particularly frustrated when I didn't get picked, and I got picked sometimes, I got dropped a lot of times. But in hindsight, when you look at Eddie Halvey, for me, was pound for pound probably one of the best rugby players that Ireland has ever produced. He was just, at the time, of course, I didn't give him this credit, but on reflection, I do. He was absolutely fantastic. Ger Earls, in his pomp, he played for Young Munsters, and I was playing for Old Crescent. So it was basically the average age of Old Crescent was about 14, and the average age of Young Munsters was about 40. So we used to get killed. So it was always a serious battle. But I'll tell you a little story about Gerald's. I was playing, it would have been in the Killen Fields, and he was open side, I was open side. Like, Gerald was a super player, right? And whoever our scrum half presented the ball to scrum, and Ger Earls tapped the ball out of his hand and into their side. So they would have had Paco and Claw, whatever else, and Fitzy as the front row. And of course, my instinct jumped up, get up into a massive fight, and I got killed, of course, because, you know, I'm playing with children against men. But like, that's what you do, isn't it? You know, you just get on with it. So I said, right, that's never going to happen to me again. This was back in maybe 1993, 92 or something like that, right? So fast forward anyway, and I was captain of Leinster we played Leicester back-to-back, home and away. We beat them at home in the pool stages, and the last game of the pool was away, and we beat them away as well, which is pretty cool. And Neil Back was the open side for Leicester. So we were in Leicester playing, and Austin Healy presented the ball to the scrum, and I said, hang on a second here, and I tapped the ball out of Austin Healy's hands, right? Now, this Neil Back was unfamiliar with the local Limerick dynamic of you immediately fight at this stage, so he kind of grumbled, but there was no fight. Then fast forward a couple of seasons later, when Munster played Leicester in Cardiff in the European Cup final, and the Neil Back hand of Back came into play. Were you playing that, Jerry?
No.
Well, you
we won the games that I played in the final.
In fairness to you. But anyway, he went in and all hell broke loose, obviously, right? So you can trace the Neil Back hand of back to Ger Earls, whose son Keith Earls would have been involved in around that time as well. I've often giggled. I learned that from Ger. I did it to Neil Back, who subsequently went back to Munster to do it. So I always thought that there was a little bit of a story in that.
I would never blame Gerald's for that. I'm blaming you, because if you had the cop on to just leave it, like, you don't mess with Gerald, you should have just left it, then Munster might have another European Cup.
That is fair. But he learned me well to use proper English. He learned me well. But I would say, going back to it's a kind of a, looking at the back rows, my initial reaction is Peter O'Mahony. Mick Galwey picked Peter O'Mahony at blindside winger at number 11. Is that a nod towards Jonah Lomu in the World Cup in '95 when Richie Wallace had to face this guy who no one heard of called Jonah Lomu? They played off. So that would be worth if this was a real match, that would be worth seeing. How would Richard Wallace react to Peter O'Mahony in the guise of that? But it's a kind of a Leinster, the back line that Mick Galwey picked, I would favour over the Donal Lenihan back line. Subtly, the front row, the front five of Mick always looks like a Leinster side. So it's an intriguing matchup. But the back rows, Sean O'Brien, Dennis Leamy, and Halvey with Quinlan, Foley, and Wallace, like, they're top six. They're quality players. It would be wonderful to watch. But again, for me, Eddie Halvey he was some player.
A phenomenal talent. It'd be interesting to see if Sean O'Brien and Leamy could actually function with him, or would he just drive them crazy?
Well, you might argue the same case on the flip side with Foley and Wallace and Quinlan. I know they have, but how much catering would they have to do with Alan Quinlan? The same with Eddie Halvey. These are characters that have lit up our game, and obviously Alan Quinlan himself was like, I played the day he played his first game for Munster was against Samoa, and I was playing that day. I hadn't really known him. Like, I'd have been 20, he'd have been in around that. So we're two young guys playing, and I was blown away by this guy, Alan Quinlan. Like, he was just very raw, but he was, even at that age, he was pure quality. Like, he was a quality player, amazing athlete as well. So, like, that was the environment that, if you think of poor old Ger Earls, who unfortunately didn't get picked for Ireland, and in my mind, I played against him. He was certainly more than, like, he should have played for Ireland. He didn't. But you've got to look back at the competition in Munster at the time was pretty, world-class stuff. Like, really was, in fairness.
So boiling it down then, if you were to call it, which side do you think would win if they were to play each other?
I think the Ireland selection by Mick Galwey will win that particular game. But I think Mick Galwey, knowing he was probably picked on the Limerick team, has definitely picked what he perceives as weaknesses in the side he picked for Ireland. So he's favoured his other selection, and that would be classic Mick Galwey. Like, if if he was in an Irish trial or something, he would try and manipulate the opposition team in a way to give him the best, which is quality Mick Galway politics. Like, what is he? Nearly 50 caps for Ireland, a Lions tour and an All-Ireland medal. He didn't get there on just his talent. He got there on his ability to know and to pick and sides. So there's no doubt he's put subtle weaknesses into that side he's picked in order for him to win.
And who would you be able to pick out as the subtle weaknesses there? Which players would you say would be the weakest?
I think considering the audience, anyone who's played for Leinster would be.
Oh, very good, very good.
Considering the audience, right? Considering the audience.
All right, Liam. Thanks very much for your time, man. Really appreciate it. Well done again on the work you're doing with Midwest Simon. And yeah, thanks for joining us, and keep safe throughout the rest of the bizarre circumstances that we find ourselves in now, and take care.
And I would also say thank you guys as well, and for Katie and the team who've organised this. Is a great initiative. It really is a great initiative, and well done to you, and well done to Katie and to all the people who are involved in Thome Park, etc. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, so after a stuttery start, we are finally joined by Simon Zebo and Donal Ryan, who are seated in some public space in a very sunny Paris, I'm guessing. How are you doing, lads? Thanks for joining us.
Good, yeah, really good. Thanks for having us. We're here in Simon Zebo's balcony, so it's good. He's flying fiddle as well, and he's enjoyed the old COVID experience a lot by painting his toenails. Scary stuff.
Very nice.
Thanks, man. My daughter.
It's been a good excuse for you not to train, Zeebs. At least you don't have to keep up. You haven't had to keep up a pretense of training. I know you hate it. So.
I've been training. I've been doing a bit, you know. Yeah, just keeping on top of things. But my daughter obviously comes in the way at time to time, and you know me. Sorry. Back foot mess. Yeah, I did not expect that. I was saving it since I walked in the door. I was like, oh my God, this stinks.
But yeah, no, really good, really enjoying it. We're back training next Monday. We were in this morning doing testing for COVID, and to get the results back tomorrow. So they're going to put us into small groups of 4 on Monday, and we're going to probably disperse out the day, and some guys will be coming in at 7:30 and be finished at 11:30. Other guys will be coming a little later in the day and finishing maybe at 7:30 and stuff. But no, it'll be good. So we're due to be back playing matches in September, all going well. But yeah, you know, we could change that as well. So kind of the first month I think is going to be very easy, so not to cripple any bit of motivation going into the season, I think. So instead of doing maybe a 4-month pre-season. So yeah, we'll see. But like, really looking forward to getting back training at the moment anyway, and seeing a few more people, so which is good.
How has it been being stuck in a foreign country in the midst of all this and the kind of madness of it? Like, were you caught in the hop? Was it ever considered to come back to Ireland? Did you just have no choice in the matter, or how did it come about that you were in France for this whole time?
Yeah, it just kind of snuck up rather quickly, you know. It kind of last minute, I think, with a week or so to go before the official lockdown came in, we had the opportunity to leave if we wanted, you know. But you'd have to do the self-isolating and things like that, and we never knew when we'd be called back into training, so you'd be playing with fire there a bit. So I think we were just best off to stay at home, and looks like we'll be training for a couple of weeks the next week or two, and then we'll have some time off. So hopefully it'll ease off a bit then, and we get to come home. So.
What's it like? Sorry, Dunk. What's it been like in general over there? It was because it was pretty strict, the lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very strict. So like in the first few days, actually, my daughter, she had her 2-year checkup at the doctor's appointment scheduled months in advance, and we had to go out and just go to the doctor. But we were stopped by the police and unmarked cars and stuff to make sure we had like a piece of paper written out from like with our address and the time we left our house and what was the purpose of us being outside. And there was a bit of an army presence around where we were as well, just maybe double checking on that. And if you didn't have that piece of paper to show what you were doing, basically you were fined €350. So it's pretty strict. Couldn't be further than 2 kilometers away from your home. But be fair, it's probably a necessary thing, you know, because people weren't just going out to drop the hat, like, you know, and really been very conscious about what they were supposed to be doing. And to be fair, it was quite eerie. Like, there's nothing on the roads, very, very quiet. Normally our area is quite busy, but yeah, it was really people, I think, over here probably paid attention to the rules, and which actually has been quite good.
Good stuff.
Tell us, Donal, you've been there, it's almost 3 years now, so you've been there nearly 2. How did you find the adjustment to going over to France? Because it's not a hugely, even at this point, a hugely well-trodden path for Irish players. So, Donal, maybe if we start with you, just the fact that you were obviously coming from a position of being a line-out caller and being someone that was really involved in the nuts and bolts of game planning and the set piece. Zeebs, you kind of always have more of a laissez-faire attitude, which is kind of part of your game. So you kind of both coming from very different experiences. How did you find the adjustment of coming to work with French players, first of all, and secondly, with players from kind of every corner of the earth? Because I know a club like Racing, like most clubs in France, you have people from like almost every continent in the world in one form or another. So, Donal, starting with you, how did you find it?
Yeah, it was really exciting. At the beginning, it was just going into the changing room, and there was no one there, but you had your picture on the training center where your locker was, and it's kind of cool just walking on, looking at all the other players. It was just into Simon Zebo a second ago about what's her name again? It was great. You know, you're seeing like Joe Roccacoco, Anthony Titavaki, Dan Carter, and Yannick Nanga, all these guys, Pato Albacetti, all these serious players, serious names and stuff, and to be talking alongside them was such a really cool thing, and they're such normal guys. So yeah, it was really good.
I have a child losing his mind in the background here. Ezzy, relax. Sorry. He's going looking for his mother. It's okay.
But yeah, so I think I unfortunately got injured my first game. I damaged my neck, so I think I wouldn't have been as big a name a player, I suppose, going over there. So I was really keen to make a good impression, and kind of felt that I was trying to bring all the traits that I had as a Munster player over to Racing and show what really Munster was about, and just pretty hard work ethic, and unfortunately I wasn't able to at the beginning, so I found it very frustrating. But once I got on the pitch, then I literally tried to give as best as I could and just make it as good a representation of an Irish player who's gone abroad and basically doing it as best he can, and that was my motivation, really, I suppose, just to enjoy the experience and try to probably. It was really different at the beginning of games, because you know, it's this, like, you know, you play Pro 14 and I don't think it has the same intensity as the top 14, and they're going to these small villages and like casts and stuff, and you're literally the whole town are out beating the bus going in the door, and we're getting that every week, which is absolutely great, very exciting, and as well, I suppose at the beginning you're playing against these guys and they're giving you abuse on the pitch in French, so it's great because you have a clue what they're saying. So, but other than that, no, it's been great. Really enjoying it, and obviously it's great when he came over as well. So it's just to have another bit of Irish banter around the change room.
So, Zeebs, moving on to you. You were obviously born and bred in Cork. You spent your whole life at Munster. What was it like going over to France? You'd obviously spent plenty of time in France before, and you had a grasp of the language that you used to exaggerate, I think, in my experience, but you had some sort of knowledge of it anyway. How did you find going over and kind of being in a place where people were from all over the country and the world, and there was such a mix of cultures and languages and everything else?
Yeah, I was very excited by it, you know, and obviously having a French speaking background, it would have been a little bit easier for me, but the fact that the team is so multicultural and international, you know, it's very easy to mix with the players and get on with everyone really well, regardless of whether you can speak the language or not. you know, and obviously to go and play against, or having played against them, but to play with like Virimi and Teddy and, you know, Finn, all these guys, you know, they're incredibly talented people. So to be able to fit into the system and to see how players bounce off each other and gel, and, you know, just to fit in has been really good and seamless. And yeah, it's amazing. And you know, for such an international team, you know, we probably wouldn't communicate as much on the pitch as a Munster or Leinster or any of the English charities teams or things like that. So you're for the backs anyway, you're going a lot off body language, and, you know, like it's so cool to play in a team like that. Although you prefer more chat at times, but the fact that like one movement of the hips or a side step left and right and you're reacting off that, and, you know, you can't defend it because we don't know ourselves what we're going to do. So to fit into a system like that has been really it's been really cool, and it's been like it's been a really good 2 years. The experience so far has been.
Moving on to the teams, lads, because that's why we're here after all. We might start with you, Dunners. If you can have a chat to us about the second row partnerships. Obviously, we've got Tom Hayes and Malcolm O'Kelly on the Irish side, and Mick and Paul O'Connell on the other. What are your thoughts on that? Are you bitter about being excluded from either starting 15, first of all?
Just even make the page, Duncan, is just an honour. As I'm sure you're disappointed not to make the cut yourself there, but yeah, there's some interesting ones. I was looking at actually the team, the Mick Always one, and I've actually played with the starting 50, every player on that team, which is just give you a perspective of the age. But yeah, I think Paulie for the Donal's selection of Mick and Mick Olive and Paulie is a good one. I think I would have picked that too, to be honest. And I think Tom Hayes and Mal. I think it's a tight one. I think Mal has a toss up between Mal and Paulie there. I think they're two great players. Mal was seriously fit player, and I think
Hasn't a lick on Paulie.
But Paulie probably maybe have the old brain power. Mal was very fit.
Mal,
yeah, very fit.
Very politically correct. Very politically correct.
But yeah, so yeah, I think they're kind of pretty evenly matched there. But I'm going to give the nod to Olive and Paulie, and that one I think they might just they'd have the good relationship together over the years as well. Yeah, and also Olive is very good at giving an old pre-match speech. I'm sure he'd have all the boys pumped up as well. And Paulie, that might be awkward before the two boys be mad to get a bit of bike time before the game.
Zeebs, looking at the back three. If you're looking at the back three there, there's an interesting matchup there when you've got Richard Wallace against Peter O'Mahony. How do you see that one faring out?
I haven't seen too much of Richard Wallace play now, but I fancy him to do a job over Pete, to be honest. Pete is. I've seen Pete play
even in his 50s.
Yeah, even in his 50s. Pete gets a lot of props for playing on the wing for Cronin one game when he absolutely did nothing. He was just basically a shadow on the field. So it's quite funny. But I'd go with Richard Wallace on that. Pat Murray, no chance. And Ersey, I'd have Ersey in. So I'd go Ersey, myself and Tommy, to be honest. It's a good looking back three.
I can't really see that one getting beaten either myself.
Yeah.
Pat Murray is like the exact opposite of you, Zeebs, in terms of being slow and steady and yeah. But then you've got the X factor there, so
okay. We've actually no pace in the back line at all apart from Ersey. That's actually Paulie. Really? Yeah.
Just moving on, because we're talking to Trevor Brennan in a while. Did Trevor play in the second row at any stage, or was this kind of a bit of poetic license that was taken by Mick Galway? Because he's on the bench as a second row.
No, he was a second row for Toulouse.
Toulouse, yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. I only remember him playing in the back row.
You just didn't do your research, man. That's it.
Did you play in that game where Pete played on the wing, Zeebs?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I was playing in the centre. So
Okay.
yeah, 13, sorry.
You were probably, it was when you were slightly more rotund than you are now, maybe, was it?
Yeah. Still get the fucking job done, Dunk, I tell you that, man. Fucking no snapping.
So, in terms of a
How's the
verdict,
Lego coming on?
Obviously not that well.
so lads, in terms of an overall verdict on which team you would see winning, what would be your thoughts there? Zee, to start with you.
I'd see Donnacha's, well, the team Donnacha has there. I'd see that pack doing the job, and my back line. So if we could mesh them two together, and if we couldn't, I'd probably go with my team, Galev's team.
Yeah, I think our pack would definitely win. I suppose a big question would be is who's reffing? Like Claude there, I think, and Galev would be dodgy enough, but I don't know if we get through the whole match with 14 or 15 lads on the pitch. But I'd be very hopeful that our boys will do the business.
All right, lads. Well, look, thanks very much for your time. We're running on kind of tight windows here to try and pack in as much as we can. So it's been a pleasure chatting to you. Apologies for the initial hiccups. We can blame Mark for that. I'm sure he'll be happy to take it on the chin. He was giving out about you incessantly before he actually managed to get online. So I think it's only fair that he showed us some of the blame for it. So look, the very best of luck with the return to training and the return to what will hopefully be the playing season in September, and keep enjoying the nice weather. Although we're not having bad weather here ourselves. So mind yourselves, lads, and take care. All right, I'm joined now by two of, unfortunately, what became Limerick Rugby's finest exports, I think people would argue, Sean Cronin and Owen Redden. Lads, thanks very much for taking the time to join us and support the no-show game in aid of various charities around Limerick. I'm repeating myself, but the link is in the description. Please donate if you can. Sean, we might start with you. You're the first current player that we've spoken to. So tell us a little bit about how the last couple of months have gone. How have you found being away from the training centre and off the pitch for such an extended period of time?
It's been had its challenges. Been tough in periods. I suppose training by yourself at home is something you have to get used to. But I suppose a lot of lads have found different ways to get around it. And but look, it's been good. I suppose it's just spending extra time with the kids at home. It gives you that bit of extra time to do that. And while we're trying to get the training in, and they've given us full programs to do, and we've been doing some meetings on Zoom with our forwards coaches and team meetings and stuff like that, just to keep the rugby brain ticking over, so that when we come back, that stuff is fresh in the mind, so we can hopefully get going sooner rather than later.
And Owen, how about yourself? Obviously, you retired a couple of years back. You moved into the private sector. How has the transition been, first and foremost? And what's it been like being a working man, a normal working man, I suppose, over the last few months?
The transition was fine. I suppose I was lucky. I found something I wanted to do, so it was I suppose tough going to get up and running in something else. But overall, it's been pretty good. Really, I haven't. Now, I suppose the big challenge with what's going on around us. I'm working in with an aviation firm, so obviously international travel, things like that are more of a concern to people in my industry than most. So I also had a new baby boy there about 4 weeks ago. He's our fourth. So
congratulations.
Plenty of time to get busy with the family the last few weeks, and I've been on paternity leave really until now for the last few weeks, so that's been great. And the weather's been brilliant, so there's been some, I suppose, great times with the family over those period, notwithstanding what's going on in the rest or outside of that,
Yeah, as I said in the intro, lads, you both are from Limerick, obviously, but you had to go elsewhere to ply your trade, and ultimately it culminated with you ending up in kind of comprehensively the strongest team on the continent. I think very few people will argue with that, and being a very integral part of the success that team has enjoyed. Sean, obviously you went to Connacht yourself, which and obviously moving around between the provinces, while it might have been less of a frequent occurrence before, it wasn't terribly unusual. But Owen, you moved to Wasps in 2005, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to that, it wasn't really a well-trodden path for players from Irish provinces to go across the water. And you were probably one of the first to go over and really make a strong success of things. What was it like making the decision to move away from your home club at that point when not a lot of people had done it before you?
Yeah, it was devastating, to be totally honest. The period leading into the decision to go was I suppose being told that you were subject to the requirements at Munster, where it's been your dream, like you've been there in the terraces at 16, 17, 18, your friends, you were part of maybe 15 people in school who all hoped and thought they played for Munster, and then there was 6 of you when you left school who kept playing and trying to chase it, and then you get down to and then you're the guy playing, and you do carry a certain, like, you kind of, once you get there, you realize that your family are all hoping that you deliver in that shirt, and your friends are all hoping you deliver in that shirt, and then when you don't and it goes badly, it's definitely a tough time. And for players who've been through that and come out the other end of it, it's like you've got one club players who've got a certain characteristic or a certain resilience in them because they know they've been at one club all the time. But often as well, like, for players who've moved and it's worked and they've had that load of having to leave somewhere they loved, which is usually what happens in the first instance, but they bounce back and come back stronger somewhere else. That's something that stands to you for the rest of your career as well, because you've fought out of a low, and I think often those players have gone on in other clubs to thrive and do well later in their careers. And in kind of maybe it's the fact that they learned how to deal with that disappointment so early, because there probably isn't a bigger disappointment you can have in your career. Like, once that happens, it's what the game is about. How ruthless it is. How professional it is. What's needed to succeed. You'll have no more kind of, you won't miss or misconceptions around what actually the game's about. So I think that lesson has proven very valuable to a lot of people who've moved and gone on and been successful somewhere else.
Sean, from your own point of view, moving to Connacht, obviously it was, in comparison, it was only up the road really, but obviously symbolically it's a massive deal to leave Munster for anyone that's been born and bred there. How did that decision come about? Obviously the competition was very fierce. Was it a similar kind of devastating experience as Reds, or did you just see it as a logical next step in terms of working towards your end goal of having a successful career?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it was probably more of a logical step for me to take in terms of trying to develop my career, and the fact that I was hungry to try and get a taste of professional rugby. And if you look back, when I was kind of coming through, finishing up my stint in the academy in Munster, there was Jerry Flannery, Dennis Fogarty, Frankie Sheehan, then Declan Kidney brought in another. When there was a couple of injuries, and I thought maybe I was going to get a chance, and Declan Kidney brought in Andy Kyriakou over from England, and I was kind of saying, look, this might be a good option for me to Connacht. I had a contract in Munster on the table, and then Connacht came in, and it was a very, very tough decision at the time. I was done over a few months where I was kind of, rattling my brain a small bit, but I think, like you said, it was the logical step for me to take, was to go to Connacht, try and put my best foot forward up there and get game time and get professional rugby under my belt. And it's tough now. You see a lot more of it now where guys move around, and I suppose it's a big hot topic at the moment, guys going from here to there, and is it diluting the kind of rivalry? And I don't think it is, and I think that's a lot of people from the outside saying that there's rivalry there no matter where. If I went to Leinster, a guy's moving down, because everyone has a point to prove. But yeah, it was a tough decision for me at the time, but I think that a lot of players, when we're in my situation, where if you're looking to take the next step and you're kind of stuck in a position in a certain province where you're not getting game time, then you have to look outside the box and see what options are available. And I think it was the right decision for me at that time in my career.
And even just jumping in there, like, when I joined Munster from Connacht, like, I was kind of told something similar as what Sean is saying there, where he decided not to go. Like, I remember kind of being told that, you know, like Stringer, there was there, Prendy was there, Tomas, Frank, there's a few of them around. Like, there was warning signs there that what Sean was avoiding, I might be walking into. And I kind of ignored them and went ahead and did it, and ended up just leaving after 2 years anyway. So it's a very tough decision to make, you know. And I'd say Sean probably made the right one too, getting game time under his belt, you know.
Moving on to the rugby lads and to the teams in question. Sean, we'll start with you. Your matchup against Keith Wood here. I suppose Woody was obviously an outstanding player, but he was before his time in a little bit because he was a very big man, but he was obviously very mobile as well. I think it was, who were we talking to earlier? We were talking to I think it was Trevor Brennan, and he was giving out that Woody was able to be so good because he scored tries on the wing, and you're no secret to scoring tries on the wing either, but I wouldn't make that comparison really. But what interests me about you particularly is that you're not a huge guy, and you're kind of, obviously you're incredibly powerful and excellent with the ball in hand in particular, which is your real
Careful
strength.
now, careful, you're on dangerous ground already here. Sean is massive.
But how have you found that as the game has progressed and guys have gotten bigger and bigger as years have gone on? Has it been something that has ever been a factor in terms of how you've prepared? Have you had to make any adjustments over the years based on that?
No, but like looking at that team sheet there now, that matchup was worth the admission fee alone. Like, you know, me going up against Woody. No, like, I suppose in terms of me, I'd be middle of the road. I'm not the biggest guy, not the smallest guy. I suppose I've tried to work on my strengths in terms of my power, my speed, my handling. I suppose maybe I picked that up like a lot of GA when I was younger. Our guys getting bigger, I think they are, you know, and I think the last few years, it's only when I've kind of stood back a few times and kind of went, you know, the size of guys has definitely increased in the last few years. So, but looks that's the way the game is going. I suppose when you look at the most successful teams at the moment, South Africa winning the World Cup, Saracens European champions, you know, big physical, powerful sides.
You'd be stuck to each other, wouldn't you, if you played against each other? You'd be fucking. You'd be like, where are the two lads?
Well, it could be a kick-off in that match. Like, who's going to kick the ball more? Even though I was basically grabbed by the neck by a coach about 2 or 3. I won't say who it was. About 2 or 3 years ago, and he says, "If I ever see you kicking the ball again." So, and I actually saw some wild kicking from Woody on Instagram or something there recently. Like, you gotta give it to him. Like, he put in some. I think he had a crazy drop goal at one stage in one of the games. I was just kind of going, this was the loosest thing I've seen in a long time. But it'll be an interesting matchup anyway. You know, I pity we're a couple of generations apart.
How would you feel about packing down with Claw on the opposite front row? We were asking Trevor who potentially the men to watch in terms of throwing fists and that kind of thing, and it was spotted that Claw with Golovin behind him could be quite disastrous for whoever was in the opposing line. Yeah,
and I saw I think it was like a classic rugby game on Tina G there recently where it was Munster against Leinster from 2001. Now I think the Claw could have still been 35 or 36, and he was still I think he was too long in the tooth for throwing a few haymakers at that stage. But him and Mick Galwey were in the pack, and I think it was a who's who of lunatics. Like, you had the Claw, Olive, Quinny, and then a Leinster side, you had Leo Cullen, Eric Miller, Reggie Corrigan. So it was an interesting game of rugby to watch, to say the least.
Yeah, so some of the classic stuff has been excellent, has it? The lads were talking about they were showing Munster Neath from 2003, I think it was the other
watched
day.
that as well. Yeah.
Shit, I think I played in that, did I?
No.
Is that not the one where Gaffney was like, get him off, get him off now? That was me. I'm pretty sure.
No,
one of my last games ever.
Over in Cardiff.
Yeah, over in Swansea.
Yeah. Maybe it wasn't the same game, but there was definitely a game over there where I was ripped off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny seeing this stuff now. Like we were chatting earlier about how just watching stuff like Kick-Off Receipt and the Ruck. Like, I mean, playing back then, Reds as a 9. I mean,
The Ruck.
Yeah, digging the ball out, it was a different ball game entirely to what it is now. And I know we give out about the ball being slowed down by the inability to shoot players out of the way now, but I mean, it was literally like it was like American football. I'd say it was quite difficult to hone the skill of getting the ball out quickly, like you're able to do. Moving on to you, Owen. Looking at the halfback matchup, it's the backlines in particular are a really good matchup. How would you feel about Peter O'Mahony being on your wing, first of all?
Peter O'Mahony, yeah. What's the story there?
So he played wing for, I think, an All-Ireland League semi-final, probably circa 2012, I'd say, 11 maybe or 12. And he had a very good game. I didn't see the game, but he was basically briefed to run over the opposite winger, who was a friend of mine, and he managed to do it by all accounts. So it was a very effective selection. But
yeah, I wouldn't be a bit worried now about myself and Raj beside each other with Hendo and the other team. You know, the few times Raj and I did play together, it was pretty common event for for someone to come steaming at both of us within like 60 seconds of the kickoff. So there'd be no surprises what was going to happen here if this game happened. Yeah, but I don't know, the decent halfbacks there, yeah. You know,
in terms of your overall feeling, I'm not sure if you came across Pat Murray much at all in your young days.
I would have watched him. Yeah. I mean, he was a huge star in Limerick, you know what I mean, and produced some great rugby. Like at times when it was, you know, yeah, it was great at the time. You know, you'd all be off playing games around the country, and on a Saturday night, like you'd be bumping into each other and catching up on like how the games went and slagging or whatever. But it was a real buzz to the games, and there was fierce rivalries. Like
the bus homes used to be
yeah.
I remember when I started 19 or 20 playing senior rugby and getting on a bus coming home from Belfast Harlequins. My eyes were opened. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, but like, and that's really what, like, it's hard to find the next, like, look, everything changes and moves on, but it's hard to find that, you know, that kind of, like, kick or group. Like, I don't know if teams in Limerick played each other more, for example, or teams in Munster played against each other more, would you get a bit more of that? You know, I don't know, like, you know, but it's a pity. Like they're great. They were great days, you know, and like there was fierce rivalry between the clubs, like there is between the provinces now. And for a period, there was both. You know, you had the rivalry between the clubs, and you had rivalry between the provinces, and it all worked for a little while. But like certainly Pat in those days was setting the scene alight, you know. Yeah, there was a few good fullbacks around the time. I'd have thought, like Brian Begley was playing with Old Crescent, Dominic Crotty was playing with Gary Owen. And Shannon themselves had a Jason Hayes, I think, was another very good fullback for Shannon. You know, so they had some serious players at the time. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, it's very true what you say, and it's a pity really that not that it's been lost, but I think that probably the golden era of the social element of AIL rugby it has probably passed. It's not the same as it used to be, where like I probably just got the tail end of it, where you'd play on a Saturday and the lads would be out in you know, lads would be out in their club polos or their club shirts. Well, the Gary Owen lads would be wearing their shirts, everyone else would be wearing polos. And it was great, like, and I'm glad I got to taste a little bit of it. Remember, those bus journeys were dangerous though. I think I've only had one really bad one, but we were playing Belvedere away, and I think it was my birthday the next day, so they were making me scull a load of drink. But I think the following weekend was Ireland were playing New Zealand in Lansdowne Road, and I had arranged to get tickets off Jeremy Lally, and I don't know what possessed him to give me the tickets when we stopped in the final furlong on the way back down, but he handed them to me as we were leaving the pub, and I remember thinking, Jesus, maybe this isn't a good idea now, but I said, no, I'll be grand. So I took them and put them in my coat pocket. Anyway, I had a great night, didn't remember a whole pile of it. Woke up the next day dying. was sick, I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly. And it was only at about 2:00 it struck me, oh, where are the fucking tickets? So I went up and checked in the bag, no sign of them. Checked in the jacket, no sign of them. And I was talking to JP Tucker, and he said the last he saw, I was waving them around in the air when I was coming out of the office bar to get in the taxi home. So I'd say some taxi driver got very lucky that night and couldn't believe his luck. Probably took them straight out of my hand and sent me on my way. But just to finish up, lads, in terms of a verdict, you're obviously biased because you've been selected on the Ireland 15, but as someone pointed out earlier, because Mick Galwey was selected on the other team, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he selected a deliberately weak team to play against. So what are your own thoughts on who would win the matchup overall? Owen, you first.
If it was a final, we'd win.
Yeah.
Very good. Shawnee?
Yeah, I think
Can I just make a point?
There's enough big game players there now and obviously Sean or like Woody would have to play the full 80 because the bench doesn't look great on his team, you know.
That was always poor coming off the bench.
Black he could never handle disappointment of not starting, and that always affected him. He's just tried too hard when he came on, and an old yellow card here or there would be detrimental to their finish, you know.
Can I just ask a question? Were me and Owen excluded from the Limerick team because we burnt our bridges and won all those trophies in Leinster? Like, is that why we were excluded from the Limerick team? Just
not even on the bench.
No.
Yeah, you'd have to take that up with Donal Lenihan. I do think it's somewhat odd that Donal Lenihan picked the Limerick 15.
Look, I'm not giving out now because I'm not on the bench on that team either. So I'll take what I'm given. Like.
Yeah, we might get some clarification off Donal for that.
We should be grateful for an old start though, Sean, to be fair. Like it's not we don't have enough of them between us really. So.
Oh no, I'll take that now and run with it.
Yeah.
All right, lads. Well, thanks very much for your time, and the very best of luck with everything going forward. Sean, best of luck with the return to training and playing. And Reds are the very best of luck with the return to work. And I hope you and yours all continue to stay safe and healthy for however long this current madness continues. So thanks very much, lads. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Duncan.
All right, now we're happy to be joined by the two Trevors, Trevor Brennan, who is in France currently, and Trevor Hogan, who is in Dublin, if I'm not mistaken, Trevor. So thanks very much for joining us, lads. We appreciate you giving up your time. Trevor Brennan, we might start with you. We were speaking to Simon Zebo and Donal Ryan a little while ago, who have been in Paris for the duration of the lockdown and everything that's been happening. How is life in Toulouse treating you? How have the last couple of months been?
Well, listen, lads, it could be a worse place to be in lockdown. You know, we're in the south of France. It's 28 degrees. There's a swimming pool out in the back garden, so and a gym that the lads put in. So, no, listen, there could be worse places. No, happy enough. Obviously, the hardest thing is the bar has been shut down for the last 10 weeks. But apart from that, no, I can't complain. But as I say, listen, it's tough times for everyone, isn't it, lads?
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, just on the subject of that, obviously hospitality has been hit massively all over the world. Really, there's kind of nowhere that's been immune from it. Is there kind of a roadmap back to normality to some extent in France now?
Well, we're just getting news today. Actually, it's funny they're only announced it, but the bars and restaurants are going to be open on Monday or Tuesday. Sorry, but what they're putting in place is obviously a distance between tables, so you might lose probably between 30 and 40% of your turnover, obviously taking out every second table and stuff and spreading people out. Just about staff wearing masks, chefs wearing masks, anyone carrying food or taking orders have to wear a full face mask. It's just, I think it's a bit OTT panic stations, but listen, it's just something we have to go with and just take it day by day. But we're ready anyway to open up. We've been in there for the last 3-4 weeks. I'm sure Jerry's the same. Just keeping on top of things, cleaning lines, cleaning shelves, taking the opportunity to get the old chewing gum off the tables and the chairs, and cleaning the toilets like they've never been cleaned before. No, we're ready. Fingers crossed we'll be back open on Tuesday and we'll give it a good lash.
Can you just cover your mic kind of in between talking, maybe?
Yeah. One of them got a tin whistle. I'm still minding the two kids here, man. One of them got a.
Jerry, will you put their kids away, will you?
They're being very selfish here. They're actually. If I was to show you, they have like one of them Batmobile things as well. So I regret it. Here, lads, can you go away? Just. All right, I'll cover my mic in between. Sorry.
You need to fuck off, Jerry. I thought you heard you say fuck off there, Jerry.
Trev, what are they saying to you around the social distancing? Is it 1 meter, 2 meter over there, or what?
It's 1.5 meters in between tables, Jerry. But you can have up to 10 people on one table.
Trevor Hogan, we'll move on to you. Obviously, different experience. You're in Ireland. You've been working with Leinster. How have you found the detachment from rugby that happened very suddenly? How have you adjusted to that?
I'm grand. It's when you hear the stories like what Trevor's talking about there, the reality of life for people trying to get on with their daily existence, and there's a lot of worse people off than what I am. I'm lucky enough. My wife is still working. She's working away, but it means I've had to do a bit more with the kids at home, which is great. It's great time you'll never probably normally have, but it's intense, and I'd say I've aged some amounts in the last couple of months, but like it's nothing compared to what everyone else is going through. Hopefully there is some sort of solution in the next couple of months that rugby can get back up and running, so we can get on the pitch again with the academy and the younger lads. But it's in that context of how devastating. I'm just realizing how much damage is going to be done to the economy, not just for this year, for the next couple of years, and we just have to keep the reality of what that's going to impact on everyone, rather than just our own small issues we might have. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm grand, but you just have in the back of your mind how bad it's going to be for everyone for a good while to come.
And Trev, you're obviously working with Leinster, your coach now, as we've said, but it wasn't a direct transition after you finished up playing. You were obviously went back and studied, completed your studies to be a teacher, and you kind of moved into coaching again more in more recent years. What was it was it spending that bit of time away from rugby made you realize how much you missed it and how much you wanted to be involved in a professional setup again, or how did you come to kind of move back into rugby?
Yeah, it was a bit of luck, and it was a bit of a kind of crossover between teaching and the qualities you'd use as a teacher and a coach, and just the job coming up, or a new role coming up, working with the academies in the 4 provinces. And it just had a great blend for me that you'd be working with young enough kids similar to school age and trying to develop them and seeing them come through. It was just, I hadn't really considered a life of a professional coach at all, because as Jerry and Trevor will know, and yourself, Duncan, the intensity of the professional top end coaching is it's relentless. Like, so I wasn't ever intending on going down that road, and then this kind of came up as a role with the academy. So that was perfect, and it's just coming up to maybe 4 years now when I'm back in it. It was either that or the teaching, so it kind of works together. All the role matches each other pretty well. So I'm just delighted that's the job I have at the moment. But yeah, it was, when I finished, it was a long time where I kind of found out where I was going to go. I was kind of just reassessing everything. I was doing getting a lot of political work and activism and stuff, which I'd hopefully get back into at some stage. But I'm happy enough where I am now with the family, and just keeping the head down with the coaching.
Just to follow on from what you finished up with there in relation to, you've obviously been very prominent in your involvement with various political matters over the years, and you were probably the first person in the professional era to kind of have to be a figurehead of campaigns and to be kind of involved kind of at a really hands-on level with a lot of things. Do you see the role of sport kind of becoming slightly more political in the years since you would have left, or do you think there's still an issue with regard to athletes being expected to keep their mouths shut about whatever it might be and just shut up and do their job on the pitch or on the track or whatever it might be?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, Duncan. I think it depends on the individual. Like, I was fairly low profile, so it wasn't as if I was going to be making any major waves. But I think if people are genuine and they feel passionate about issues and injustice or whatever's going on in their own communities and society, if they speak out and if they're genuine about it, doesn't matter how much of a profile they have, I think people would generally take account of them. But like you said, I think in the last few years, last decade, lots of sports people are showing courage to stand up, and probably none more so than Colin Kaepernick in America, and seeing what he's gone through. But the issues aren't going away, and with what's going to happen in the next few years off the back of this pandemic, you'd be worried that inequality and all the rest is just going to get worse. And you'd hope that people will be able to see, not just for their own lives, and try and help other people to get through things. And sports people will, I think, have a big role in that. But like you mentioned there's a tricky balance if you're, a sports player that don't want to rock the boat with your organisation, your employers. You just want to keep the head down and focus on what's in front of you. And lots of sports people are like that. They just want to stay in the moment and stay with dealing with what's in front of them. That's understandable. But I think in the next while we'll all kind of have to stick together as much as possible and back each other up.
Yeah. Trevor Brennan, going back to you, you mentioned just before we started recording that Josh and Danny have been training away out the back. Obviously, Danny featured heavily in the Irish press for some post-match interviews he gave during the Junior World Cup campaign a while back. How are they both getting on? I think everyone would like to hear an update on their progress on the rugby front.
Yeah, going well. Obviously, that was 2018 after the World Cup when they interviewed him. I don't think the guy was expecting a north side Dublin accent, from the Liberties. So when they beat England in the final, no, he's going well. He left Toulouse 2 years ago. He went down to Montpellier. Unfortunately, last year in a top 14 game, he tore the muscle, the quad, off the bone. So he's been out for the last 6 months. He was due to make a comeback in March, the end of March, but obviously this COVID stopped that. But I think that might have been, I think for someone like anyone coming back from an injury, whether it's a cruciate ligament or, a bad ankle injury, shoulder injury, the more time you get to rehab, the better. So, he's got his weight down from 140 kilos to 130 kilos, and he's lost that, let's say, that baby fat and turned it into muscle. So hopefully that'll stand to him next year, and he'll hit the ground running with Montpellier, and he can nail down the starting spot in the Montpellier team. The other fella, Josh, he was captain of the under-18s last year. This year, you'd say. They won the Six Nations. Then he got called into the under-20s, travelled over to Argentina. He didn't get any game time, but he picked up a World Cup medal as well in Argentina this year. He came back, he captained the French team, I think, the 2 games in the under-20s this year in the Six Nations. But he's just signed a 3-year deal with Toulouse, and I think we could see him, even though he's only 18, but he's 6'6", 18.5 stone. So I think we could see him featuring in a couple of games with Toulouse next year, whether it's the top 14 or European. But yeah, he's a guy who's absolutely savagely driven. I suppose when you're a rugby player and you look back in your own career, I suppose it's different for guys who had a father or an uncle or someone who played rugby. I never had anyone in my family who played rugby, so I made a lot of mistakes and I had to learn the hard way. So I suppose, I'm always giving the guys advice on what to say, whether it be in a press interview after a game, a post-match, how they, hold themselves on the pitch, off the pitch. Obviously, we live in an era of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. So, all them things. But obviously, we all look back and we all have regrets. I suppose some of the regrets I might have had is, they didn't train as hard, or I could have trained hard, or I could have drank less. And yeah, it's all them things. But listen, you can only give them advice and guide them, you know what I mean? But they are their own men at the end of the day, and they'll make their own choices. But yeah, they're going well at the moment, thank God. Fingers crossed, Duncan.
I know you've been asked this and answered this question plenty of times before about there's obviously been questions about whether they would ever come back. I know it's kind of realistically they probably won't, but does it ever kind of disappoint you, the fact that these lads are quite possibly going to be good enough to play Test rugby and that it'll be wearing blue rather than green?
Well, listen, you know what I mean, I got my chance with Leinster. I got my first chance, you know, when it comes to rugby with Leinster, and obviously, you know, Ireland. So I feel very privileged, you know, that Ireland and Leinster gave me my chance. But I also feel very privileged that Toulouse and France have given me my second chance, whether it be in life and in rugby. And certainly, you know, we've been adopted by Toulouse. I suppose they're passionate, as they are in Munster and Cork and Limerick, about their rugby. It's the same, like I say, Trevor, Mick, Galway, Keith Wood, Peter Clottershee, they go walk anywhere in Limerick, Cork, Kerry, and they recognise, you know, whether they haven't put on a jersey for 15, 20 years, just they'll always be a part because they've given something to that jersey at the time that they were playing, that they're, you know, I mean, blood, sweat and guts. And I think it's the same in Toulouse. And I think they like the fact, because in France, we see so many people coming into this country and picking up a contract, big money for 2-3 years, heading back to New Zealand, Argentina, South Africa, England, wherever it is. But I think they like the fact that I stayed in France. I opened a couple of bars, I set up a business, I created employment, I did a bit of coaching when I stopped playing with underage teams in Toulouse. And now the fact that my kids have come through the system, you know, I never pushed my kids. It was just a natural thing. They just, you know, started playing rugby, whatever. Like myself, when you're 12, 13, out in the field with a couple of mates and then joined the club, and they got picked up by the underage system. So listen, sorry, Duncan, I'm rambling on here. But no, that's really it, Duncan.
No, you're all good.
Trev Hogan, having a look at the two teams there, we thought we'd have a bounce off yourself and Big Trev in France there, and looking through the two teams, Trev, looking at the locks and the back five that have been picked in particular, but from your speciality, looking at the nick the players are in, being an expert on you were always the player who was in the best nick. How would you consider these teams as a matchup there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just pulling them up here. No one can throw them up on the screen, can you? Just trying to see so we can compare. Like it's fascinating, the two second row combinations. So, what kind of rules are we going? What kind of era are we playing in here as well? That's the other one I was trying to get my head around. I mean, I think
you work off the players at the top at their height, at their powers. I think you work off Mal O'Kelly. We're obviously not going to put Pat Murray up against Simon Zebo now currently, because that would be probably unfair, and you never know, Zeebs might get embarrassed as well if Pat Murray pulls something out of the bag. But I'd say at the height of their powers, looking at the two teams selected, what do you reckon?
So yeah, I look at Paulie O'Connell against Malcolm O'Kelly there. I mean, they would have matched up against each other a lot over the years. You could imagine that battle again, and a lot of it will come down to maybe who's partner with Mal, you know, to kind of, because Paul would have possibly a little bit more abrasiveness and maybe around the park that Malcolm wouldn't have. So maybe Mal would need the Tom Hayes to fill in for that, to cover that, a little bit of that ground. I'd probably lean towards, just by virtue of what Paul has in terms of his competitiveness and his driven nature. I'm not saying that Malcolm doesn't have that himself. Paul and Golov would probably have the edge on Malcolm and Tom Hayes. Now, you know, Malcolm and Tom, both very intelligent, clever operators. Not saying they're lacking a hard edge. They just probably don't have the same hard edge that Golov and Paulie would have.
Trevor, get off the fence here, man. You just made the longest answer to who would win between the two of them, man. Okay, so you're backing Golov and Paulie there.
Yeah, I still have doubts about them winning as much possession potentially in the line-out than the other two, you know.
And Trevor Brennan, going on to you, you obviously, it's no secret that you were considered to be one of the tough guys of Irish rugby and French rugby when you were over there as well. So looking at the two sides, and in particular the front rows and the back rows, who were the standout kind of hard men that would
yeah, I was a bit disappointed now Alan Quinlan made the Munster side ahead of myself now. Jesus. Yeah. Keith Wood ahead of Jerry Flannery. So what the fuck's going on, Tal? Keith Wood played in the wing most of his career. Well, no. No, two good teams. Obviously, Peter Clancy. I'm looking at this. I had to write down the sheet. Peter Clancy, obviously Limerick 15. Yeah, Claude. Listen, I suppose Claude, what he brought, on the pitch, his fighting spirit just incredible. Keith Wood, as I said, great player. He scored a lot of tries, but I think he missed. He didn't like being involved in the engine room too much. I think his job as a hooker, most of his tries were scored on the wing. John Hayes, obviously, what he brought to the game, the modern game, obviously being 6'3", 6'4", players like Donal O'Callaghan and Paul O'Connell having a guy like him to lift them is just incredible. Mick Galwey again. Mick wouldn't have been the tallest second row. Modern day rugby, he might have struggled, but certainly what he gave around the pitch, incredible. Paul O'Connell, just listen, you don't really say anything, the man just speaks for himself. Quinny, again, just a hard player. I know he wound me up a few times in the day, but I suppose, listen, throw a question at me there, lads. If, I don't want to go on too long like Trevor there, but I don't want to break down each player individually.
Who would you least like to get in a row with, Trevor?
Never really bothered me, to be honest, but who would you fighting against? But no, probably Jerry Earls, if I was to be honest. He was a tough old cookie. How that man never got more caps for Munster and how he never got a cap for Ireland, I'll never know. Like, I played against Jerry Earls in the AL and he was tough as nails. Like, he reminds me, he'd be like the Cheslin Colby of rugby today. He wasn't a big man, but what he gave to, putting his body on the line was incredible.
Pretty good.
Trev, you were talking up Liams.
Just in terms of getting in rows with lads, you'd have to be careful. Like, there'd be the obvious lads you'd want to avoid, maybe the Paulies and the Sean O'Briens. Leamy, you wouldn't want to be in the wrong position with him coming in for a slight dig, because he is fairly animal strength, So, yeah, see, it depends as well. I know I could come back to this. What era? How much could you get away with, in this match or when it kicks off?
It's for charity, so we can do whatever we want with this. There's going to be no sightings, no nothings afterwards. So.
No, in fairness, I think we were lucky, Trevor. We played in the generation. I suppose before rugby went professional in the 90s, like, I went away to New Zealand for 5 months in '93, playing rugby over there. When I come back, it was just a different beast altogether. Like, the old studs used to be sharpened up the night before a game, and rucking and stamping. You just wanted to do as much fucking damage as you could to people. But there was no real TMO.
That's what was spark off.
The judges was normally a fella from each team, and you got away with murder. But obviously today the game has changed. It's so controlled. You've got cameras, TMOs, you've got sight and after games. But I think any of us who played, in the amateur era and the professional era, and you see the change in both. Obviously, there's times, every team needs an enforcer, and Paul O'Connell would be the enforcer certainly for a team, and Alan Quinlan would step up there as well, where you'd have someone like David Wallace to do all the fancy stuff, great footwork. Peter Clancy be another massive enforcer. Obviously going, I'd have Peter Clancy, I had a Jack McGrath, Sean Cronin, I'd probably have, Sean Cronin, I think, Jerry would be able to talk more about than I would, but certainly he's a guy, he's fast, he's mobile, he carries the ball, I don't know, I think he should have got more caps than he has up to where we are. Rory Best, I don't think should have got as many caps as he did in the last 2 years. Certainly, I would have had someone Cronin, like, you know, horses for courses and things like that. But go on, lads, mix it up there. Someone throwing another fucking question.
No, well, we've been going a while. It's to see what between the two teams. We just get a prediction from me. So, Trev Hogan, give us a prediction. Which team do you think, the Limerick or the Irish team? Who do you think would win it?
See, I think the halfbacks there, Redzer and Raj, would probably edge it for me in terms of what they do with the possession. I think I can't get away from the era one, because it just, as I'm looking through it, Keith Wood, Classy, I just feel that Shawnee Cronin and Jack McGrath would have the edge on them, actually.
That's a big call, Trev.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like, Keith Wood probably won't mind. It was just, the throw wasn't his strength. Would it be fair to say that? Like, I'm just readjusting my assessment on them winning as much possession as the others. So based on that assumption, which is huge, but
keep it short, Trev. Keep it short.
I go with the Ireland XV is selected by Mick Galwey, just to edge it with the halfbacks that they have and that stronger pack.
Yeah, it's fair. There's a pretty mean backline on that Irish side as well. Trev B over in France, tell us what you think.
Jerry, I'd probably go for the Limerick side, because listen, it didn't matter what fucking team you guys picked, you always just played with heart, and you can't beat heart over talent. Like, I don't care what anyone says. Like, you've got 15 guys who are willing to die for each other on the pitch. It doesn't matter if you're a superstar, second row, back row, out half. You know what I mean? That's what it always was about Munster rugby. Like, whether you played against them with Leinster or whether it was against with Toulouse, like, just, you know what I mean? You just knew you were up. It was a war, like, something just in them guys' heads. Obviously, you guys put on the jersey. You just, like, you took out the disc, the nice disc before the game. You put it in your bag, and it was just, you put in the disc. It was war, and that was it. Like, and you just knew you were always in a battle. Listen, I'd say you could put that Limerick 15 up against any World 15 and give them a run for their money. Because, again, it just comes down to heart and passion. And, you know what I mean? That's what I love about Munster rugby. Like, and I think that's what the respect that they have worldwide, all over the world, for what they do. And, you know, the miracle matches where, you know, they're not supposed to win and they come back and win. And that all comes down to heart, lads.
Well, we have our pundit split, so we have a split in the pundits.
Yeah. Well,
he's making a good case there, Trevor. But yeah, I have to stick with what I said. There's plenty of heart in that other group too, though.
You had your chance, Trev. You had your chance. You backed the wrong side, kid.
Listen, I have to go down to Limerick now to visit Claude during the summer, so I'd be walking around on Donal Street. I'd only be wearing a bulletproof jacket, you know.
All right, lads. Well, look, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks very much for that. And the very best of luck with kind of the rest of the coronavirus strangeness that's going to come over the next while. Trev, the best of luck with the opening up next week.
Yeah.
And take care of yourselves and your families, and we'll talk to you soon, hopefully. Right, now I'm joined by another two very recognisable former Shannon people, Joy Neville and John Lacey, who were very successful on the pitch as players, but subsequently transitioned to becoming very well-known faces in the middle of the pitch as well. You're both very welcome. Thanks for joining us here in the No Show Game to raise funds for various charities in the Limerick region and beyond. As I've said before, please donate if you can at the link in the description below. Joy, you jumped over to the dark side in 2009, but I think Shannon will always lay claim to you because that's where you started off. So I hope you'll forgive me for calling you a Shannon woman anyway. But
not at all.
We might start with you because obviously, look, you've been a very recognisable face in terms of, as I said, being a man in the middle of the pitch for quite a while now. And I know I've spoken to you about your journey to becoming a referee previously, but you you hung up the refereeing boots, I suppose, the AstroTurf boots or whatever kind of boots you wear as a referee last summer. Can you tell us a little bit about the decision and the new role that you've taken up since?
Yeah, well, look, it's you come to the end of the career at some stage, like yourself, whether it's unforced or whether it's a decision to move on. So I was coming to the end of the career anyway, and I was due to go back to Munster Rugby, but an opportunity came in the IRFU to take over as the high performance coach when they restructured. So, you know,
and
I knew
break our heads.
Yeah. Oh, very good.
Very good.
So I suppose it was an opportunity to stay involved in coaching, and I knew the 5 referees that I was going to be working with were very good people and had a lot of potential. So it was kind of an easy decision, to be honest with you. So you miss it a little bit, but don't miss the travel at the moment. And as it happens, going forward, travel is going to become a little bit more difficult, and that's why we're here for this great no-show event, really.
Yeah, it's kind of, because obviously you finished your playing career and then you were stuck back in the middle of rugby again at a high level, albeit in a different role. So I know like the transition from playing to not playing is a difficult thing for players, but what's it been like as a referee to have gone back in, having played previously, but now to step away from it? Is there a similar element of kind of a loss of camaraderie that you would have had that players that stopped playing experience, or was it different to your experience of finishing as a player?
Yeah, I tell you, that's a really good question, Doug. I'll explain why. Because I thought I'd actually dealt with retirement before when I stopped as a player. I went straight into refereeing, but all I did was jump from one team into another type of a team, which I never saw refereeing as a team. So when I stopped for real this time, and I probably had a stopgap that I ended up working for World Rugby at the Rugby World Cup in Japan, working with 5 of the Tier 2 teams, helping them around referee decisions and trying to help them stop giving away penalties and cards to give them a better chance. So when I came back from the World Cup, I realised that was it, really. I was really retired. So I kind of, for a few weeks, found it a bit strange. But and I'd always been training with Munster as well. So I've always been involved with the team, I suppose, for a long time, and now Joy is going in there, and George Clancy and Andy Brace helping Munster, and I'm beginning to step back. And yeah, it took me a little bit of a while, but I'm happy enough with it now, and I kind of work with the Irish under-20s this year as well. So I still keep my finger in it a little bit, but yeah, for sure, retirement definitely came this time, and I won't be going back into another on-field role. That's one thing for sure. Yeah, but it's not easy. It's not easy because you miss that camaraderie, and it's the same for players or referees when they hang them up.
Joy, turning to you, obviously, look, it's no secret over the last few years you've really blazed the trail for female referees, and it's been so terrific to see. Like your trajectory was on a really steep upward curve, I'm sure you'd agree, and everything was going the right way. So how frustrating has it been for you personally now to not be able to keep building on all the momentum that you'd carved out for yourself over the last number of years?
Yeah, look, thanks for that, Duncan. Look, it hasn't been easy, but I'm optimist, and I'm very, I'm able to understand the predicaments that we're in. We've our health. My family haven't been affected by this. We've a roof over our head, and yeah, you miss being out there in the middle of the park. But Johnny has us very busy. We've been able to do things that we wouldn't be able to do if the schedule was running as it normally would be, with the amount of travel that we have. So we've had very interesting conversations around the different elements of the game with very interesting characters, and a lot of good has come out of it, but certainly you're missing being out there, the challenges of managing 30 players on the park and all the rest.
Johnny, I've been asked in interviews, like various interviews that I've done over the years, about safety in rugby and elements regarding safety that kind of that lead to concussion and that kind of thing. And my answer is always that World Rugby, I genuinely believe, have taken as many steps as they possibly can to make the game as safe as possible. And I think ultimately, if you go beyond a certain point, rugby stops being rugby, and ultimately it stops becoming a sport with the level of contact that it fundamentally is at its core. So obviously there's the discussion now about trialing dropping the tackle height to the waist. I mean, do you think from a referee's point of view, is that going to be a difficult thing to enforce? Is it going to be hard for referees to change their behaviour and look out for that? Because as we know, there's so many things to look out for already.
Yeah, I'll answer that in two parts, Duncan, actually. The first one is around the concussion. So, and I think people seem to forget sometimes, you know, and we know we get stick at referees, it comes part and parcel. And even the players are getting a lot of stick in social media these days. But one of the things that is our responsibility is to make sure that 30 of you guys are safe on the field. You know, obviously we get booed and shouted at and all the rest of it, but we want all of you to come off the field safely. One of the laws, 3.14, covers that we can overrule a doctor. If I feel, Dunk, that you're concussed and then the doctor doesn't see it, I have the power to remove you myself. That's the first part. So we want all of you to come off. The high tackle framework that was brought in during the summer at the Under-20 World Championships, flowing into Rugby World Cup, was one of the things that was my role, was to make sure that that a lot of the Tier 2 teams got up to speed with the type of tackles that they're making. And funny, we're all watching some of the golden oldie matches at the moment from 2013 and the Lions and all these matches that are on TV. And some of the headshots that I'm watching on some of the older stuff is incredible, you know? So I think statistically, the cards went from 46 down to 17 for high tackles from one World Cup to the next. Players are more aware that headshots and dangerous clear-outs with shoulders are coming out of the game. So players know that they're going to be out, they're going to be dropped if they're getting sent off, and they're not going to get back in, and there's financial loss for them. So I think where we are right now, I think we're in a good place, and I don't think we need to change it anymore. We just need to reinforce the law, and players and coaches need to take that responsibility in their coaching on field. So if there's tackle tech being practiced, any high shots in training, I know working with the Irish team and Munster, any high shots, the coaches wanted me to bin someone straight away, just to replicate that in training to stop it happening on match day. So any 50-50 high, guys were sent for a sin bin for a minute in a training session, just to reinforce that point. And I think, to be fair to the players and coaches, they're driving that in the ground as well.
Joy, to go back to you, referees, correct me if I'm wrong, you only, rugby referees in Ireland only turned professional in 2017, is that right?
Yes. There was 7 of us at the beginning.
And what difference has that made to the experience of referees in terms of how much attention you can give to the game and how much professional development you can engage with, in addition to all the physical work that obviously comes with being a referee as well? I think people underappreciate the level of physical fitness you need to have to be able to follow the game as closely as a high-level referee needs to do so. What difference have you found that making?
It's been massive, but I think mainly people probably don't realise the amount of preparation that we do in a typical week in the lead up to whatever game, particularly in the pro game. But when I first started, before we became elite and fully contracted, I was working as a rugby development officer in LIT, and what I found was, and whilst the travel was pretty similar, you were just shattered going into your day-to-day 9-to-5 job, giving that maybe 60-70%. And as a result, at the back end, the weekends, you were quite typically tired going into the matches as well. And at this level, you can't afford to go in at 80%. You have to go in at the top of your game. I suppose it allowed us, our typical week would be training on a Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. Come home on a Sunday, Monday after a game. You do your post-match review. You have to link up with the PR. You have to link up with Johnny as your coach. Go through your, what you need to work on and what went well, and then submit that. And then come, Tuesday evening, Wednesday, you're back into your pre-match analysis. And then depending on the individual and the referee, like I would do quite a lot of pre-match prep and looking at the teams and trends. And others may not as much, but that would go Wednesday, Thursday, and then back traveling Friday, Saturday, and it's every week. So there's a lot in it, and by becoming full-time professional contracted, it means that we can give the attention that's necessary to lay a platform for the players to play the game.
Moving on to the sides that have been selected, Johnny, we'll get both of you to look at the sides through a referee's lens. Johnny, if we start with you with the Limerick 15, I was talking to Quinny a little earlier, and I mentioned that kind of axis of Claw, Gallup, and Quinny on the left-hand side of the pack there would probably cause more than their fair share of friction with regard to their interaction with the opposition pack. Who are the people that you'd have to keep an eye on in not just in the pack, but right across the pitch?
All of them.
Well, I was just looking at the two teams, and I either played against, or refereed everybody on both teams. So I went through the 30 names, but I remember poor old Axel, God rest him, he always said having Halvey and Quinlan on either side was like having stereo sound on both sides because they never shut up, he famously said. So I think, yeah, you just have to go soft hands with Alan. That's the only way to deal with him. And Halvey was just Halvey, you just couldn't just leave him off. But I mean, Gallup was the old master anyway. I always used to say, even to people, watch him put his arm around the referee. So he used to always put the old arm around the referee when he was having a conversation. And I always thought it brought him in, the referee, into Mick's world and that lovely, nice Kerry accent and all that, and nice soft hands. But Gallup was a master at giving the old arm around the referee and get him to eventually see what way Gallup had. But I mean, I talked to Woody quite a bit. He does a lot of media stuff, obviously, and he likes to get himself up to speed in any referee stuff that's there. So I often talk to Woody, but Woody knows his stuff around the law and stuff like that. So he'd be quite challenging if you made a few mistakes during the game, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's that Kerry element, really, isn't it? I think, and I know it's been said plenty of times with people, but I think Kerry people just have this inherent genetic capacity to engage with people that really lends itself to being in a leadership position on the pitch. The cute tourism that they're renowned for, it generally does have a lot of benefits when it comes to engaging with a referee in an environment where you need to be very respectful, but also need to communicate your point. Joy, in terms of dealing with players, like can you see almost when a player is trying to get you on side, and you need to be sharp to kind of have a guard up against that?
You could definitely see the characters, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of characters in those two teams. I obviously hadn't the privilege, I played a bit of tag with a few of the lads and I refereed a few of them, but yeah, I think as a past player, I've always, when I first started refereeing, I struggled with how to approach the players, and I kind of had to be reflective on how I like to be refereed. So that's kind of, aided me in my approach, and you can only be natural with your own approach. But what I found is, as a result, you kind of have this empathy with the players. So I'm kind of able to, and I'm sure Johnny, you can agree, you're kind of able to see, when you need to go soft hands on a player when things aren't going their way and the emotions kicking in, and if you go hard, you lose the player, and there's no win whatsoever. So there's times that you have to go soft. You're certainly able to recognize the characters that are trying to get what they need to get out of you. I probably was known as one of those cheeky smile and just get on with it. But certainly I think it's a benefit as a background as a past player in how to deal with the players, because that's the most challenging, having to come up with different ways for different individuals in order to get their buy-in and keep them, I suppose, interested in manipulate them in a certain degree to get them to do what you need to get them to do. And certainly with those two teams, I think I would be my worst nightmare to referee for those teams, 100%.
And looking at that Ireland 15, particularly, Joy, like it's kind of a more, it's probably a more modern looking 15 than the opposite side. The Munster played Neath in 2003, and that was on recently, and that's come up a lot in the conversations that I've been having with people. And everyone laughs just about kind of how lawless the breakdown was, and just kind of how messy things were, but also the fact that the game, to the naked eye at least, was a lot more free flowing because the referees were encouraged to be, how would you say, looser with the laws. So in your own opinion, like, is it more difficult for a referee now when they're expected to be so strict on refereeing everything but there's it's very black and white, and there's very little grey area now, compared to, say, in the noughties when you would have played yourself, when probably a lot got let go, but it was harder for a referee to draw the line and say, okay, no, that's over the top, or I have to penalise that. And it was probably a very difficult balancing act because there was a lot more of that grey area.
Well, I watched that Neath game as well, and I found it extremely entertaining. The amount of high shots. I mean, there was a couple of red cards in there that were played on. And Prendy in there with his bleach blonde hair. No, look, I think it's a really difficult role. And even back then, but certainly now. And I think it would be fair to say that as a player, I found it much easier, because as a player, you're expected to make human errors, mistakes, miss a tackle, and knock on a ball. But as a referee, you're held at a higher regard. And considering that the game is so grey, as you just well mentioned there, and in a way, it's down to the individual referee's interpretation of what's happening at the breakdown and so on. And you know, it was pretty free flowing back then, but probably too free flowing. There was a couple of last necks there. But yeah, look, it's a difficult job, and because there are so many grey areas, and when you know, I suppose all we're trying to do is referee across the board in the world, when we get direction from World Rugby in what way, and try to be as fair as possible to both sides. But no, it's not easy.
Just to finish up, lads, Johnny, if we start with you, I know you, like in a real game, you'd both have to be impartial and you wouldn't be able to favour one game or another. But thankfully, this is all fiction, and I would say a lot of the guys that are slated to line out will be thankful for the fact that this isn't happening in real life. Johnny, who would you favour, the Ireland 15 versus the Limerick 15? Who do you think will come out on top?
Well, I thought this was going to be a bit of a slagging job, and I did have a story about Tom Hayes in the Irish 15, so I think it's worth telling this story, even though he's a big and he's a Shannon man as well. So he went on to captain Exeter Chief, as we all know, and I ended up refereeing Exeter Chiefs versus Claremont. Superstar team rolls into Exeter for the first time, and Tom was captain. So of course I leave the changing room and walk into the changing room into Exeter Chiefs, as you do, and meet the captain. So first thing we did was we had a big hug and an embrace in the changing room, which the whole Exeter team was shocked. What the hell is going on here? Tom Hayes is hugging the ref and the match hasn't even started. But so I said, right, Tom, I said, don't be shouting at me now today, and all this type of stuff. We had a bit of a laugh. So of course, match kicks off, full house in Exeter, and Tom is into me from the get-go, right from the start. He's, Johnny, come on, this, that, the other. But so I'll never forget, it was a brilliant first half, and Exeter leading by 2 points or something like that. And it was like everybody was shocked, because Claremont had Wesley Fofana and Para and all these superstars of French rugby, and they were expected to get wiped. But Claremont came out in the first 15 minutes of the second half, and they scored 4 tries against Exeter. And Tom, of course, he was only tackling shadows. He couldn't even get a hand on some of these offloads. So I knew he was sucking diesel anyway, and he couldn't even breathe. So I went over, Tom, have you got that for me? And he couldn't even speak, so he just started laughing. And then he got substituted straight after that. So we had a great laugh about it after the match. But I'll have to go with most of the guys that I played with and stick with the Munster team to finish your question.
Joy, to touch on what Johnny said there, like you obviously, look, you refereed, like you refereed me, you've refereed plenty of people that you would know from around the place. Does it bring an added dimension to it? Like, is it difficult when it's people that you know that you're in the middle of?
Well, I'll give you a better one. I remember I was reffing Old Wesley, and the Rowleys, David Rowley and Mark Rowley were playing, brothers were playing with Old Wesley. This is when I first started. And I used to babysit the boys when they were younger. They lived down the road from me in the North Circular. And so I came in and someone cracked a joke and said, oh, I hear you know the boys. And they didn't realise to what extent I knew the boys. Like I said, would you stop? I changed their nappies. Well, they were mortified. No, I think, you know, you kind of have to put your game face on, and you have relationships, and I think people respect the fact that, you know, you can have that embrace, like Johnny mentioned, with Tom in the change room. Once you got on the pitch, it's you know, it's pure professional. So, but I don't mind referencing those who I know. Yeah, it's a bit of a personal element to it beforehand, game face on, and thereafter. In the end of the day, we're human. So.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of a verdict, Joy, which side would you reckon would take it?
Have to go with the Limerick side, kid.
It's not a surprise from either of you. Well, look, lads, thank you very much for joining us here in the No Show Game. Really appreciate your time. That was a really interesting chat. And
Duncan,
take care.
Thanks for your time as well, Duncan, and best of luck to Shannon. I hope you sell loads of tickets, and all the charities are fantastic. So, and Joy would agree with me 100%. So, well done for giving your time, and I wish you every success in the night. And we'll get it out on our social media platforms best we can.
Absolutely great. Thanks very much, lads. Mind yourselves. Okay, we're joined now by another recognisable face, a Shannon man and a Munster man, Alan Quinlan. Alan, thanks very much for joining us here in the No Show Rugby Game in aid of various charities in Limerick and beyond. How are you getting on?
I'm good, Duncan. Yeah, thanks very much for having me. It's always nice to recount old stories about my rugby playing days in Limerick, playing with Shannon. We had such brilliant success, and I always count myself very lucky when I moved from Clonwilliam in Tipperary into play with Shannon, and I won 4 All-Ireland leagues in the trot. So it was brilliant success and really, really happy memories for me.
So, yeah, as someone who works in the media and sports media in particular, but I suppose to a big extent around live sports, what's it been like now with the withdrawal, I suppose, both professionally and personally from sport of any description, really, to focus on? How have you found it over the last couple of months?
Well, I think it's hard to believe that it's nearly 11 weeks since the kids were off school. I think it was 11 weeks yesterday. The 12th of March, around that date, and I just don't know where the time has gone. I think initially it was shock, like it was for everybody, that Leo Varadkar is announcing from the States that the schools are shutting down. Then we have kind of 2 weeks of social distancing, but still being able to move around and stuff like that. And you know, I have a little boy, he's 11. Well, he's not so little anymore, and he loves being active and out kicking a ball, kicking rugby ball, soccer ball, whatever, cycling. So we went to loads of parks with some of his friends those first 2 weeks, and it was brilliant fun. I love going out in a bit of nature, going out into the parks myself, and just kicking the ball around with them. So that's what we kind of did for 2 weeks. And then the full lockdown came, and it was kind of like, what are we going to do now? We can only go 2 kilometers, but the park is pretty close, so we cycle every evening, and we've been doing that for probably 8-9 weeks, 4 or 5, at least 5 times a week for 2-3 hours in the evenings. And he's done his homework in the morning, bit of chill out, kind of maybe a bit of PlayStation in the mid-afternoon, and then it's out in nature, and it's that's what it's been. And I've loved that part of it, you know, going out and kicking the ball around and cycling and just doing a bit of exploring in the parks all along by the river and stuff like that. So that's been really nice.
In terms of being within the sports media circle, Quinny, is there a lot of optimism that the rugby will kick off when it's due to kick off now in August? Or is there kind of is it a bit cautious at the moment with respect to the plans that have been made?
There's still a little bit of caution there, because obviously Philip Brown announced it from the RFU's point of view that their roadmap to return on the 22nd, 23rd of August with interprovincials, but we've not heard anything from Scotland, Italy or Wales yet what their plan is to do. Now, I suspect that will happen the next week or so. Pro 14 haven't officially come out and said, well, this is exactly what's happening for, like you hear stuff from different journalists, and you're getting some sort of information that there's 13 Pro 14 games played. There was 8 left to play. They're going to try and play 2. It's finish with 2 games, give everybody 2 games, and they're going to be derby matches in the different countries to try and, you know, make a push and get in that playoff stage, and then you have a semi-final and final. So there's still a little bit of caution, but there's optimism that, you know, you got to try and move forward. I think I have to be very careful what way I say this, but you know, sport is a very important part of people's lives as well. And aside from health, the health and safety of people is the most important thing. But the reality of this is, if some sort of movement doesn't happen to try and get back into sport, well, some organizations might sink completely, and there's a lot of people's jobs. I'm on the other side now, and I still work in the media, and people would say, well, you're only saying that because you work in the media. Part of me is saying it because I work in the media, but the reality is there's a lot of, the vast majority, my opinion on this is that there's people going to lose their jobs here and they might never recover. And, you know, that was highlighted by Philip Brown, and it's the same in lots of different industries. So it's not just about the players going out playing a match and, you know, they're getting paid and they'll be fine, but it's the people who work in the industry. And there is a lot of, I don't class myself as a journalist because I never went and studied journalism, but there's a lot of really good journalists who work in sport who could be out of jobs. And if sport goes, and you know, that's an area that will be hit, the print media, the TV coverage of sport and stuff. So sport is important, but the people's jobs are important as well. So look, hopefully we get back. I think people want some good news. I think John Horn, the GA president, came out and was pretty clear a couple of weeks ago saying, well, this is what's happening and people's safety is first and we won't be returning under social distancing. Some people said, well, it was good leadership. Others said, well, there's no optimism there. I'm actually by nature a little bit pessimistic anyway. It's in my nature, unfortunately. But I always try and see, is there any light at the end of the tunnel? I want some bit of light, even if it's not true. I want to believe it's true. And I'd love to see, you know, the GA come out and say, we're going to open the GA pitches. We're going to try. It may not happen, but this is what we want, you know. So we've got that from the rugby now. We've got that from Premier League in England. And, you know, we're learning all the time. People are only learning about this, Duncan, you know. So look, hopefully sport does come back because it is an important part. You don't have to play sport for sport to be an important part of your life. There's people I know in Tipperary here who look forward to bringing their kids or going to a junior hurling match or a junior rugby match on a Sunday. And that's part of their life.
And I was just going to follow on to that point. We kind of share the esteem of having started our club careers in Clanwilliam and then moving on to Shannon and then Munster. I stopped at Munster. You went on to bigger and better things, fortunately for you. But a club like Clanwilliam, because obviously the professional game has been talked about a lot, and probably to some extent, far lesser extent, the AIL game has been talked about a lot. But when you actually drill right down to the kind of lower tiers, I suppose, of rugby in the country, like a club like Clanwilliam, it's a junior club. It's the third oldest club in the country, a huge tradition. I know like a lot of these clubs are hugely reliant on individual events throughout the year. I know the Clanwilliam one is the big Stephen's Night fundraiser, and that really sets them up financially for the coming year. So in terms of the people you've spoken to back home, like what's the situation with regard to Clanwilliam, Kilfeacle, clubs like that around Munster that are kind of staring into the abyss financially now?
Yeah, it's really difficult for them. Thurles are close by, Cashel are senior club, very close, Galwey very close as well. So Carrick-on-Shore, Clonmel, there's a load of junior rugby clubs here, Nina as well. So it's incredible how rugby has grown here in the last 20 years in Tipperary, and you know, obviously traditionally the hurling, you think of Tipperary, you think of hurling, and that's what I grew up wanting to be, a Tipperary hurler. But some say I didn't have the skill or the touch to be that talented hurler, and I followed the path of rugby. But they're, you know, it's like the GA clubs. I think and the soccer clubs here, they're all going to feel the pinch in this, because, you know, you still have to pay for insurance for the club. You still have to maintain the facilities. You still have to get jerseys and all that kind of stuff, which are costs. And a lot of these clubs are kind of running on an overdraft scenario anyway. And as you say, certain times of the year, they get a block of money or they get some good gate receipts. They have a run on a cup and they can pay off some of that overdraft. So it's a kind of a continuous battle to try and get funds in and keep the clubs ticking over. You've got to maintain the buildings and the facilities, and all those things cost money. So it is a concern and a worry. for them. Will we see him back playing this year? I met someone from Clonwilliam today, and you know, they said, will there be any junior rugby this year? And you kind of bring it all the way down from the top, from professional game, where the professional athletes are going to be tested. But what are you going to do with amateur rugby players in rural parts of Ireland? How can you facilitate kind of a testing system for them? So I don't think we're going to see any junior rugby back for a while unless we get some sort of news on a vaccine or an antiviral drug, or this bloody coronavirus goes away. So it's a big concern and a worry for people. But they've got to find ways and hope that, you know, everybody right across the communities, you know, and you go to some of the towns around Ireland, and traditionally you get some sponsorship from the shops and the retailers, but you know, they're in a position now where they're financially hampered, and so it's a very difficult situation. People are doing lots of kind of online quizzes. They have these 50-50 draws. So they're just going to have to try and weather the storm, and maybe if the IRFU get going again and start generating some funds, that maybe there can be some sort of facility made available to help the clubs as well, and some grants and stuff like that. But it's a very complex situation, and it is a worry. But look, Clonwilliam has been around for a long time, lots of great clubs throughout the country, and I'm sure they'll weather the storm and maybe get through it. But it's going to have an impact for a couple of years. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. I have very happy memories at Clonwilliam. I think it was one of only 2 trophies that I won in my entire amateur or professional career. We won the O'Connor Cup. I think there'd been a bit of a drought. I think it had been 5 or 6 years before, or since Clonwilliam had won it. So it was a short-lived time in the Clonwilliam jersey, but very memorable. I remember I had my Leaving Cert geography project due at 9 o'clock the next morning, and the lads made me stay out. And
you were trying to get home.
Exactly, yeah, sculling points and Nellies and Tiptown. So I wasn't in the best frame of mind when I was doing the final touches the following morning. But moving on to the teams that have been selected, you've obviously been selected on the Limerick 15 by Donal Lenihan. Looking at that kind of that aisle of the pack, Peter Clohessy, Mick Galwey, and yourself, there's 3 lads that were kind of well used to living on the edge, we'll say, when rules were maybe a little less strict than they are now. I think there was a massive place for the element of a bit of a rogue, the guy that could, you know, ruffle the opposition's feathers, and it's probably something that's kind of gradually being eliminated from the game now. I certainly think it's a pity, because I really used to enjoy characters who were able to bring a really hard edge and were able to live on the edge and kind of be really effective and kind of be enforcers in a way that they're probably not able to at the moment, because they have to be so careful about, you know, first of all, causing an infringement and then getting a suspension or whatever else. So what are your thoughts on that, the fact that it's become so tightly policed now that element of rugby has escaped somewhat?
Yeah, well, I wish, first of all, I wish I would have been a bit different. My makeup or my DNA or my desire inside me that I obviously was very, very lucky to, you know, play for Ireland, play for Munster, and be a pro for 15 years. The regret is, you know, 27 caps for Ireland. I personally, without being cocky, think, you know, if I was calmer, if I was a little bit more controlled in my thought process, and maybe didn't kind of cross that kind of line at times, that I would have had more caps. And that's part of the frustration for me. But look, some parts of that desire drove me on and kept me coming back. I would have been unlucky with some injuries at different stages, but you know, I always think when I started going to AIL games in the early mid 90s, you know, it was take no prisoners, and it was, you know, if you're on the wrong side of the ball, and if you were doing a bit of cheating, or if you were slowing the ball down, that you got a bit of a shoeing, and that was it. And you kind of got out of the way, and if you put your body in the line there, you kind of accepted it. And unfortunately, I didn't kind of change my mindset always, and that old kind of mentality came back at times. And I wouldn't say I was a dirty player. Some might disagree. No. I think I was more foolish and maybe tetchy and narky, and that kind of created a distraction sometimes. But, you know, I do agree with you in a sense that you need someone to kind of take hold at times. If I had a choice, Duncan, I'd go right back to the start and say, well, somebody else do that, please. I just want to use my talent because, you know, I could do crossfield kicks. I could do 20-yard passes. I could make breaks and score tries. But sometimes I was distracted with scuffling with someone or chasing someone, you know, chasing someone down that kind of give me a punch or clip me early on. And it does affect performance, you know. So with respect to the modern day players, they're very robotic. There is no sort of cynicism there. There is no sort of, well, somebody's bullying us, we can't react back and kind of go toe to toe with them. And that does frustrate me a bit because I think New Zealand, with the greatest respect to them, have probably been the greatest rugby team we've, you know, the greatest team ever and consistently, but they're bullies. And that's a compliment. You know, part of their incredible talent is, well, we're not just going to beat you with skill and the talent we have, but we're kind of going to lay down a marker and say, well, how dare you even think that you can cross our line and touch our ball or frustrate us, you know? So they're very much the protagonists around, you know, setting the intensity and stuff like that, and they blow teams away sometimes. And I think, you know, sometimes you've got to react to that and be physical back and be a little bit cynical yourself. And I think sometimes, you know, if there's any criticism for modern day players, they're hamstrung to do that because you get punished. So it's kind of a catch-22. Well, if somebody's killing your ball and you know, probably one of the greatest rugby players of all time was brilliant at it, Richie McCaw, for years and years. Well, if you stamp on Richie McCaw's backside or his hamstring and get him out of there, or ruck him or step over him and you put a foot in him, it's a penalty against you and a yellow card, so your team is punished. So it's kind of getting that balance, really. But I think, you know, it's one thing, it's not about being dirty, it's just about being physical and being a little bit narky and a little bit aggressive. And some guys are very good at tempering that. You know, Paul O'Connell is probably has as much, if not more, narkiness in him, but he can control it better. And Paul was always brilliant at doing that. You know, sometimes he threw a punch or got into a scrap or scuffle, but that's why he was a captain. That's why I wasn't a captain, because he was brilliant at doing that. You know, Golov was the same. I remember Golov saying to a referee one time, well, you sort it out quickly or else I'll sort it out or we'll sort it out. You know, that kind of an attitude. Claw was kind of similar. That, you know, Claw could kind of lose the plot completely and just run in over a ruck and stamp all over someone and give away a penalty. But he was an incredible player and he was a hard bastard to play with. And I remember he stamped on me in training one time. We were on the same team. It was at Munster training. There was a bit of a training match and I was at the side of our ball. It came back pretty clean to Peter Stringer, and he stamped on me a couple of times. And I said, Claude, what are you doing? I'm actually with you and I'm actually nowhere near the ball, even if I was the opposition player. And he just said, look, he said, take your shoe and like a man. And that was his attitude. So part of the old school Limerick AIL brutish kind of police to break down yourself was brilliant. But of course you can't have that, and you can't be stamping and punching and kicking people. And you know, for the safety of the modern day players, you can't have that, you know, and again, the safety of players in the rugby field is the most important thing. But sometimes you just love to see a little bit of rucking, you know, not punching or headbutting or shoulder charge. I think shoulder charging into a ruck is actually much more dangerous than actually rucking in a rucking motion backwards and getting someone away from the ball. You know, you're not going to do untold damage to someone, have a little bit of rucking. But look, I'll probably get criticized for saying that.
No, I'd agree with you. I'd agree with you wholeheartedly, because people seem to think that it's like people calling for the ability. Like nobody is asking for permission to hurt the guy, like, you know, to actually do damage to them. But like I'd be very much in agreement with you. I think people, when they talk about shooing or rucking guys that are on the wrong side, without getting too technical, like I think people assume that belongs in the 90s or something like that. But like when I started playing professionally, I think by the letter of the law, it wasn't allowed, but people still did it. And there was never anything said about it because it was just accepted. And it was only really, I think, 3 or 4 years ago that it became something that you couldn't do anymore, really. So it's not that long ago. And like, I know there, obviously everyone's come out of games with stud marks on their back or their legs or wherever, but I think the like any serious damage that was done by it was rare, if ever it happened.
Yeah.
I think it served a purpose. But I would agree with you.
It served a purpose, but I don't think there's a need for it now. I think, but I think it frustrates people that if the guy kills the ball here, it's a penalty, and it's a lot of stop-start stuff. So it's somewhere very, you don't want somebody stamping on somebody for the sake of it. But a rocking motion backwards, for me, is maybe something. But I don't think you can do that. So there's probably a waste of time us even saying that maybe it should happen, because it won't change, and maybe it's the right thing. Maybe it's right. But I looked at Munster Neath last Saturday in TG Carr. It was 17 years ago since we won that Celtic League final, and I just thought it's incredible watching it, because you're thinking, that's a penalty, that's a high tackle, that could be a yellow card. But it was just, there was some sort of a free-flowing part of it that, even though we weren't probably as chiseled or as strong or as powerful as maybe the guys today, and that's changing all the time, and we did get fitter and stronger and more powerful right up to, when we won it the second time in 2008. I remember the condition of the players was we were all more powerful and stronger, and that gradually happened over the years. But there was just a flow to that game there was a bit of kamikaze to it, and it was just brilliant. Obviously not from a Neath point of view, but there was great excitement from the way we were trying to throw the ball around and stuff, and the ambition of players, and so rugby has changed a little bit. Some would say not for the best, and part of that is true.
Yeah, I think, and I would agree with you. Like, I don't think, I certainly never would have considered you dirty, and I think you might be a little bit harsh on yourself, because I think at the time you were playing,
I was stupid, Duncan. I was stupid sometimes.
Every team that had ambitions of going on and winning trophies needed 3 or 4 guys like you in a pack to be able to front up, as you say, when it was put up to you. So I think that if there wasn't a place for someone like that in the Munster side, I don't think Munster would have been as successful as they were in that period. So I think it was very important.
My bark was worse than my bite. That was probably it. But anyway.
Well, look, just a final word, Quinny, in terms of looking at the overall teams, the Limerick 15 versus the Ireland 15, who would you fancy and why? And maybe just if you focus on the packs, because I think the matchup of the packs is particularly interesting there.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible, and it's just unbelievable to see so many good players who've played in the All Ireland League and played for their clubs and come through the club game. It's unbelievable, and when I look at the pack, I think Claw, Woody, and Hayes. Geez, I wouldn't mind being on their team, and then I see my name down as 6, and I see Golliv and O'Connell in front of me, and I say, geez, I fancy that front 5, and then Wally and Axel, and Wally, Axel, and myself played for so long together. We knew each other inside out, and I just look at that pack and I think, Jesus, I want to be in that pack. And obviously that's kind of, I mean that respectfully, to looking across the way, because the other pack is incredible. There's a lot of brilliant players like Jack McGrath's in line, Tyke Furlong, probably one of the best, if not the best, tight heads in the world. Sean Cronin, so explosive. So successful with Ireland, Leinster as well, and Shannon, because I played with him in the 2006 final. I came off the bench and he scored an incredible try that day. Tom Hayes, someone who was probably very, very unlucky that he didn't get the breakthrough, and then showed incredible balls, if you like, to go to Plymouth and then on to
Exeter.
I'm gone blank, sorry. And be so well respected and captain the side, and have so much respect for what he achieved in the Premiership there. And on any other day, and with a little bit of luck, Tom could have been a regular for Munster, could have been an international as well. So Tom is the kind of fellow you play against, and that after a game you've played against hard grizzles, and you learn it. You know what I mean? If you were opposite to him, and then Mal O'Kelly in a British and Irish line twice, and brilliant success for Ireland as well. And then you look at the back when you think, right, I'm going up against Sean O'Brien, and wow, he's a sensational player. You know, power, pace, skill set, and ability to run a brilliant line, and you know, but I was always used to, no matter when you play for Munster and you're playing in Europe, or you get lucky to get play for your country, you never look at your opposition and go, well, they're weak. You know, at that level, you're going to be playing top quality players right across the board, and but you test yourself and you think, you know, I've got to be on the money today to get the better of them. So, you know, Sean O'Brien, I have to be fairly tuned in and no lack of concentration when you're playing against someone opposite him, because, you know, ultimately as a pack, and you know, well, you've got to work as 8. You want all your forwards like scrum, line out, but individually then you want to get that little nudge and get a tackle in your man. So it does sometimes, you know, a lesser part of it comes down to the individual battle. But you look at Eddie Halvey then, and Dennis Leamy, you know, Leamy, incredible player, someone I played with so long as well. I have massive respect for him. And probably in 2006, he was probably the best number 8 in World Rugby. I think he went to New Zealand, gave an exhibition, gave a performance in Hamilton in the first test against New Zealand, which was out of this world. I think the Irish team we were leading up to 72 minutes, and Graham Henry said it after the match that Dennis Leamy at the moment is the best number 8 in the world. So Leams was just an incredible player, and himself and Sean O'Brien, 2 incredibly physical, grizzled guys who had incredible skill as well. And then, you know, Eddie Halvey, who was probably so talented, quick, elusive, you know. So those 3 on the day would be an incredible challenge for anyone. I played with Eddie for so long as well, and you could just track Eddie Halvey and make breaks off him when he got tackled and his passes and offloads. But, you know, going through the Jack McGrath, Sean Cronin, Tyke Furlong, I'm still going with Peter Clohessy, Keith Wood, and John Hayes. Probably because I know them better and I played longer with them. And, you know, I fit, and top of his game, Mick Galwey was an incredible captain as well, you know, an incredible captain, a great leader for us and a great mentor, a guy who was calm, controlled, and inspired lots of people. And then you have O'Connell you're talking, you know, one of the greatest second rows ever. So I just think the pack, and you look at Axel then, you know, what he did for Munster, what he did for Ireland, lifting that trophy in 06, and he was an incredible inspiration to lots of us as well. So from the playing point of view, I think, you know, I played in lots of these games, Duncan, where they were kind of trial matches. I think back to one in 2003 before we went on tour to Australia, Tonga and Samoa. We played in the Lansdowne Road, as it was called then. It's the Aviva now. And you play in these games and you're playing against guys you're playing with Munster, and everyone's mixed and matched, and you just don't know what way they'll go, really. Sometimes you think, well, I'm on a better team here because I fancy, you know, oh God, Drico's on our team, Paulie's on our team, Keith Wood's on the team, whatever. And you kind of look, and then you go to the other side and you think, well, Frankie Sheen has gone up against Woody, and like Frankie could clatter Woody or just have one of those nights where he's driven to prove a point, you know. So you play a match like this, sometimes you don't know what way it's going, but I'm kind of siding with the Limerick selection, given it's the help and support to all the local charities. And I'm just disappointed Golov is playing in the Limerick selection, but he's the selector on the Irish selection. But they're 2 brilliant teams, in fairness. You look at their backline, the Ireland selection, and you look at the 10, 12, 13 scenario, Rog, Darcy and O'Driscoll, like how successful they were for Ireland for such a long period of time. And but you know, if I was in the dressing room now, I'd be going over to Rob Henderson and Mikey Mullins, and I'd be telling them that Drico and Darcy are laughing at them, and they just think they're shit and that they're going to destroy them. And then, you know, a fired up Hendo or a fired up Mikey Mullins can do an incredible job for you, you know. So
yeah, it was actually Owen Redden mentioned last night that if Hendo was on the other team and he saw Redden and Rog at 9 and 10, he'd just be steaming down the
for
channel
sure.
for 80 minutes.
And he'd be trying to get at Rog, absolutely, no doubt. And then, of course, we've Pat Murray, fullback, who was incredibly unlucky not to be capped. Brilliant leader, brilliant captain, great coach for Shannon as well. So he's at the back. So you'll forgive me if I don't get, you know, too into the back lines and kind of start
That's all
breaking
right,
all their
yeah.
strengths and weaknesses. But I think, you know, forwards win matches, backs decide by how much. And I think the Limerick selection are just going to nudge this one.
Very good. Quinny, thanks a million for your time. Thanks for giving up your time and joining us to support the no-show game. Really appreciate it. The very best of luck with the remainder of your time at home, and hopefully a swift return of sport so you can get back to doing what you do best.
My pleasure, Duncan. And I just want to say, you know, you mentioned Clanwilliam there. Without Shannon, you know, we wouldn't have had the platform we had and the success in the AIL. So it's just incredible to think at one stage, I remember being in the Shannon clubhouse and being incredibly proud of maybe 9 or 10 or 12, I can't remember the number, international jerseys. And we always took great pride in that, you know, the number of Shannon guys that were on the Munster team or the Irish team. So without Shannon, we wouldn't have kind of had that platform that we had. So I know this has been organised by Shannon Rugby Club, which is so massive credit to them, and to all the brilliant charities like Barnardos, Midwest Simon, Pieta House, Limerick Suicide Watch, Children's Grief Centre, Milford Hospital, and Rugby Players Ireland Foundation as well. They all need a little bit of help in hand, but it's also nice, and I think it's a good idea to maybe celebrate all the great players who played in the AIL and what they've done for the game, past and present.
That's right. Well, thanks very much again, Quinny. Appreciate your time, and take care.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you all for tuning in to watch the Shannon RFC no-show game this evening. Times like this call for creativity when it comes to raising funds for charity, and I think everyone can agree this has been a unique approach. So I'd personally like to say well done to everyone at Shannon RFC who made the no-show game happen, particularly Katie McCluskey and Mark Howard, who gave up a huge amount of their time to put this event together over the last couple of weeks. We hope you enjoyed our conversations with players past and present. And one final time, if you can, please donate at the link in the description below. Thank you, stay safe, and good night.